Hey, what is going on, everybody? Enter ChazmaN here, and we are back once again. I know it's been a little bit with a new episode of the Podcast. As
Yeah,
always,
I'm back from the grave.
your totally favorite place to hear Final Fantasy stuff.
Oh,
I
they've
guess
moved on by now, Chaz. I'm just
I know.
saying.
Yeah, I know. Just before we get into the main chat, I we never really got to address it. As it turns out, a bunch of crap happened. Man, I switched. I got a new job. My hours totally changed. Phoenix is always busy, and then our buddy MetalGamer, he's like literally just moved. What today? He said.
Yeah.
Which has been like a long process. So apologies for there being a long break in terms of content, but I do think from here on out, the way we were doing the content before, I don't think I can kind of continue that, but maybe from here on out we can start doing some shorter, maybe more focused content, maybe Phoenix on like, smaller stuff, focusing in on things in particular. I don't know. But
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea, at least for now, kind of. As big topics come up, we kind of, take 30 minutes to an hour, just kind of
mm-hmm.
focus on that instead of the whole podcast show, at least for the time being.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah, there's definitely some stuff I know we still want to chat about. We never got a chance to run back through Halo Season 2, which,
I never even
oh
finished it.
boy,
I got like 6 episodes in or something.
same. I got to like the episode after Reach and it started slowing down again. I was like,
That's about what I
ooh,
did. I would love to
but I do
talk
want to finish
Fallout
that.
if
Yeah,
you
Fallout
get to
show
watch
just
that.
started. Yep.
Maybe next week or the week after we could try and plan something there. But anyways, about the topic at hand. Um, so me and Phoenix and our buddy Metal Gamer hasn't yet played it, but we recently played through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Gosh, that game came out what like last month. How long this conversation is happening past that?
Yeah, well, it's a big game depending how you decide to play it. So, I mean, I invested probably far too much time into it, so it took me the better part of that month to go and work my way through it. But I've definitely got some thoughts. I'm kind of curious where they're going to land as far as how you felt about the game. I know we've had some quick little convos, but haven't really dived into anything
Yeah, I'm
too much.
fascinated.
So,
I mean, I know how we kind of both feel about like one or two aspects of the game, but as a whole, I'm curious
hmm
where we both kind of sit on that. So I don't know. I guess we felt like a good place to start would kind of just be, we don't have to go too deep into it, but just to kind of reiterate on our history with Final Fantasy VII. I feel like for me, going into this game, it was very high because I really liked Remake. I know all three of us, right, liked Remake to an extent.
hmm
And Remake kind of like, was doing new things. I guess if you haven't watched it, you can go watch our old review on or kind of chat on Remake. But yeah, it was doing some really cool stuff. I liked where it was going with it kind of having what like branching timelines kind of was what they were going with Sephiroth kind of messing with the what's it, I forgot what the was it the what's the name of the thing that Aerith goes into in this game. I don't even remember.
the live
The
stream.
live stream. Yeah, they were kind of messing around with that, and like
Oh, and
the
FYI,
whispers.
spoilers.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Just so very, very clear.
yeah.
It's probably expected, but
This whole video
um,
is centered
yeah,
around Rebirth. I think, yeah.
yeah. What about the OG game? I think we've talked a little bit. Like you played the original Final Fantasy VII, correct?
Well, famously between us, I've never actually fully finished the original game. Remember,
Um,
I got up to Sephiroth, and I couldn't beat him because I was like several levels underleveled, and unfortunately, he would do
grind.
his what was it? He had a mega attack, where he would literally throw a planet at
Yeah.
you, and it would wipe you out in one hit. And I was like vastly underleveled for that. But yeah, I love Seven.
Fair enough.
Um, Towards the end, I guess I still would love for us to kind of roundabout come back to the Final Fantasy OG versus what they're doing
Mhm.
with this series, because I think it's fascinating, maybe not entirely positive
Yeah.
or negative, I guess I should say.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I think with the way we're going to have to tackle this topic, we're going to have to discuss a little bit on how it correlates to OG Final Fantasy
Mm-hmm.
VII and how we feel about how those changes have kind of either improved or maybe not so much in certain areas as far as like the story beats that have been adjusted, the gameplay and the pacing, how that's been changed from the OG. So I think you'll get some of those comparisons just naturally as we go throughout our conversation. Um, I know for me, the OG, I'm like, I mean, I was that '90s kid who kind of grew up with the PS1 and N64 era. So Final Fantasy VII was definitely kind of on the periphery when I was growing up. But I feel like I might have been like a year, maybe too young for
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, FF7 in particular. I was still kind of wrapping up like Banjo Kazooie and stuff like that. So I think by the time I actually dug into playing the game, I was probably in my early teens. So I mean, 20 some odd years ago. But I definitely played it, within that kind of year or two release window. But I never really had that same hype that everybody else did about it. I always thought it was a really good Final Fantasy game, but was never like this is the best, Final Fantasy ever, at least not necessarily. So I did play it again a couple of times throughout the years, kind of leading up to when I eventually did remake. And I'm pretty sure I played remake the year it came out. It was 2020,
I
right?
think
Does that
it's.
sound right?
Is it safe to say that OG Final Fantasy VII was the Final Fantasy game that like really like it was popular before that, but that's like Dragon Ball versus Dragon Ball Z. It's like Dragon Ball was popular, but Z was where like it really blossomed into
Well,
what
the
it
OG7
was.
had a big shift for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons. For one, it was the first one on the PS1. They had shifted from Super Nintendo over to
Was
PlayStation,
that
so
the
that was a
first
big
3D
thing.
or where they went
It
for
was the
like a
first
3D?
3D.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it was kind of that more modernization of Final Fantasy. It was a different setting, different vibe, and it had some big moments. I think it just had a lot of, I don't know, a lot of attention on it at that time with the big shift, and it did a lot of cool new things with the technology at the time. So it was a good game. I'm not trying to downplay the impact FF7 had. I mean, if it wasn't, we wouldn't have all these remakes, 20 some odd years later. But I ended up playing remake in 2020. And I won't say I liked it more than the original because the original I think is always gonna be kind of special with the way
Mm-hmm.
it's constructed and kind of what it was trying to accomplish. But I really dug what remake did. I was open, maybe because I wasn't in that mindset of Final Fantasy VII is this perfect game, it can't be changed, you can't do anything with it. So I was open to whatever remake was trying to do towards the end with some of its crazy, the whisper adjustments and the timeline thing you mentioned, etc. So I was down for that, and it got me relatively hyped going into Rebirth. I usually, as of late, have not been one to buy a game, day one. I usually wait like
Mm-hmm.
months till it's like 20 bucks, something like
Same
that.
boat.
This game though, I got the pre-order, Final Fantasy cap from GameStop, picked it up day one, and man, my expectations have changed a lot after actually running
Mm-hmm.
through it. But at least going into it, I was very, very excited. Definitely hyped as far as to see what they built on, as far as what remake was trying to lay down. So
No. So before we kind of get into it, I mean, we wanted to kind of start off with just overall how the game performed, presentation, graphics, what any other aspect about it. It's hard to really say that this game really, I don't know, to me was like a vast departure from the previous one because remake looked really good as was. Now that was what a PS4
mhm.
game technically. So I mean,
Yeah.
as far as like cutscenes, this looks better, but I mean, would you say that the combat really fared any
Well,
different?
let's hold
Okay,
off
yeah,
on combat because that's
yeah.
kind of its own topic. Like we're talking like performance, presentation, kind of graphic stuff. Honestly, I think we kind of chose this as kind of the starter topic because I think it's the
It's
least to
it's the
talk about, if
least
that makes
depart.
sense.
Yeah, it's the
It still
least
looks
different.
good. So I mean, yeah, if that was a concern that you didn't think this was a good looking game, you can watch the trailers and see for yourself. It looks good. It played good. I played on the quality mode. Not no no I'm sorry, the performance mode. I did not do the quality mode. I did
I
the
didn't even
60
know about
frame.
that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you could choose between 60 frames,
And
but it will
30.
lower the resolution. Yeah, or you can
Oh,
do
okay.
quality mode, which was 4K 30 frames.
Hmm.
A lot of people pushed or recommended the quality mode, go for max resolution. I rarely lean that direction. I'm not a big resolution snob when it comes to stuff like that. I'm fine if it drops down to 1440 or even 1080 as long as the frame rate's smooth. So, with that being said, even at the lowered I'm sorry, resolution, I don't feel like it looked bad. I mean, you could definitely, see a little bit more artifacting, a little more jaggies
I
around the
was probably
characters, but
playing the
it still
30,
looked good.
whatever they kind of start you off as the default.
Yeah, I'm imagining that's the default is on the quality mode. I'm not really sure. But
There's,
regardless, I mean, the game
there's
looks good in either modes. I
yeah,
did try both for a little while.
because there's so many games nowadays. Like you notice that even though we're in the next generation, most of these games are coming out at 30 FPS anyway. So
Yeah, we're at that point I think with this generation that although yes, it's better, it's not that incredibly major leap from generation to generation like we used to see, right? It's not like going from PS1 to PS2. Like going from PS4 to PS5. was a pretty subtle change already, and honestly, a lot of the boost that you get from the PS5 kind of gets eaten up with the resolution boost. So if you're not
Mm-hmm.
a big person who leans on resolution, you really don't get a whole lot more. I mean, yeah, ray tracing and a few other little bells and whistles, and I'm sure there's more than what I'm giving it credit for. I mean, the game looks good. You can tell a lot of effort was put into the detail and the presentation of everything, but it does, I think, compare really well to the PS4 version of Remake. So they both look good, but they're consistent at least.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of them look bad, played bad. So if that was a concern, I mean, rest assured the game will play just as well and look just as good as it did back in the original.
To be fair, these games, Square Enix games, or Final Fantasy in particular, they kind of have to hit on the presentation because,
Hmm.
I mean, you're looking at maybe 60-40. No, probably 50-50. There's probably 50% cutscenes, 50% combat. Maybe that's swayed a little more than maybe I'm making what is it, a mountain out of a molehill. But I don't know. Now that I think about it, probably the only thing I felt like was a slight deviation from the previous one is maybe like the upgrade, like what is it, the upgrade tree or the web that they kind of have going on. I feel like that was slightly different because in the gosh, I'm trying to remember how Remake did it, because Remake had it in
Well,
terms of
yeah, yeah. If we're going into like how they kind of structure some of the systems and whatnot, they're tweaked. I wouldn't say anything is like
the main
incredibly
menu is
different.
still same, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I haven't played Remake now in 4 years, so some of the specifics on how they compare to Rebirth, I'm probably forgetting, to be completely honest. But
Hmm.
it all felt really, really similar. They definitely made a few changes. There's a few things I want to mention, particularly when we talk about combat and things of that nature.
Hmm.
But it's still the same core. So what Remake did has not, substantially changed here. So if you enjoyed the look feel of Remake, you're going to enjoy it here as far as a gameplay perspective and the way that, all the content is presented to you. If you didn't like Remake for those particular reasons, you're not going to like Rebirth necessarily either, because they haven't changed much at its core. But overall, I mean, just to kind of move things along, I thought the presentation, graphic performance was all top notch for the most
Hmm.
part. There was nothing I would really ding here. I wouldn't say it's the best looking game I've ever seen. I know some people, I've seen that kind of floating around the forums that this game's like the best looking thing on PS5 or anything out there. And I could argue there's a few other games I've seen that push things a little more, whether it be from an artistic perspective or even just stuff they were doing with the system. But honestly, that's neither here or there. It looks good, plays good, so good to know.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So yeah, I guess, I mean, we can kind of move right on into combat, huh?
Mhm.
I'm kind of glad that we have this one kind of towards the front of the conversation as well, because similar to the presentation topic, I don't really feel like they deviated again from the from what they had kind of done with Remake. It's, I mean, is it the exact same like attacks almost
No.
for every character? What was new?
No, it's
Oh no,
so
I
the
forgot
biggest
they
thing
added
that's new,
the tag team kind of
the synergies.
the synergy stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so in the core of the combat, in case you're not aware, it does kind of split between the action focus and still gives you a little bit of the tactical, not turn-based, but it lets you kind of slow down or pause time and still select commands. So they're kind of straddling that
Mm-hmm.
tactical versus action combat, which I really liked in Remake. Honestly, for both these games, to me, that's its strongest suit is combat. I'm not necessarily gonna say it's the best combat period across all action games, but for what it's trying to accomplish and how well it does it, I've always enjoyed the combat of these games in particular. But the core is the same from Remake pretty much. If you played Remake, this is the same combat with some additions. So they do these synergy, they have synergy skills and then synergy
Mm-hmm.
abilities, which I know sounds like the same thing, but they do have some nuances to them. Basically gives you a way, as you mentioned, to tag team with your partners. And it actually took me a little while to understand the benefit of using that. Like, it takes a little bit to figure out how your ability meter charges up to fill up your synergy bar and vice versa. And then that feeds into your limits and a whole bunch of other stuff. So there is a bit of a, I don't want to say convoluted, but there is a tiered system there for how all these little combat aspects kind of build into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a bit of a learning curve to kind of get used to it. So,
And you kind of
um,
you you unlock them also by that skill tree or the web tree that we were talking about. Like whenever you would get your skill points, and you could go through there, and slowly as you
yeah.
meticulously make your way, you'd unlock new ones. So.
Yeah, so you've got this little folio, I think is what they call it, which is basically a book with a bunch of upgrade nodes. Honestly, I didn't love the way that was laid out. I was trying to recall exactly how Remake did it. But I don't know, the structure of the folios, how it kind of just branched off into kind of honestly just like random directions to figure out where certain
Mm-hmm.
abilities are going to be placed. I thought it was kind of hard to track down if I was looking for a certain ability. It was a little annoying having to scroll around the folio to find what I want. And then other characters would have it located in completely different areas. So I didn't love the upgrade. Maybe it's more of a usability issue more than even like what it was trying to accomplish. But I don't know. It was laid out kind of weird. But yeah, that's where you upgrade all your combat abilities. But combat was pretty fluid for the most part. If you take the time to learn how to, switch between your party members easily and kind of activate all their different synergies and their different abilities, there's a pretty deep system here. I will say that it gets fairly hectic sometimes. I do feel like I'm just kind of brute forcing some bosses at a certain point. Like, I don't know. Sometimes you can run into that, the rock, paper, scissor kind of style of combat where you find their weakness, you throw the weakness at him, he's going to brute force that weakness over and over. So I think if you take the path of least resistance in the combat, you may not find it as engaging. But if you take the time to branch off and learn all the abilities and all the synergies, there's a lot you can do. I will say though, before we kind of shift off that, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the blessing of the curse that's about this whole game. There is a lot there if you want to take the time to get into it, but often there's too much. I think that will be probably a point we come back to a lot across other
I
areas of this game.
I jumped off the
There's a
train.
lot.
I jumped off the train way before you. It sounds like so.
Like even the like just the combat abilities, I feel like in Remake you had a decent selection of abilities that each character could do. Like there's like special moves essentially if you're trying to boil it down to something comparable. In this game, I think by the time I was done, Cloud had like 30 or 40 different abilities just in the ability menu. Then I had a crap load of synergies. Then I had a crap load of spells. Like I couldn't even figure out what I wanted to do half the time. Trying to remember what all the moves
Mm-hmm.
did was basically doing like mental gymnastics, trying to fit everything together. So in one end, there's a lot you can dig into. At the other end, there's almost too much to dig into.
No.
So I think different people are going to take different, have different takeaways based upon how they like their combat. But
So
I'll leave it there. I thought
well,
combat was good overall.
well, just before we move on from combat, I did just want to bring up that I remember when I had heard that they were transitioning from for a remake, they were moving away from turn based to like a more action based in real time combat system. I was kind of like not feeling it, not super. I was kind of hesitant on it, but I feel like after remake and then after 16, and then after this one, I'm feel like especially after this one, I think I'm really enjoying kind of this
Mhm.
deviation away from the turn based. Like, I mean, turn based is fun, but I don't know. I feel like this is a little bit more engaging. I don't know. Especially you really need to go play 16. 16 had things that made it made it fun, but I don't know. I feel like you really need to go play that one. It's not that much
That's
different.
fair. I like this combat model, man. I kind of agree with what you were saying. Honestly, I don't know if I would have been overly keen if this was just more turn-based. And I like my fair share of turn-based games, but they can get a little stale unless they have something to spice it up a little bit. Like I know you haven't played it like Persona, the way they do their
Mm-hmm.
turn-based system has some cool little gimmicks or little cool just I don't know add-ons in there that makes it a little more unique. It doesn't feel as stale with the pacing. And I feel like if they would have went just pure turn-based in this game, I probably would have felt a little tired of it after a little bit. So I like the balance between the action and the turn-based, and honestly, I think it works really well. I mean, I think I've already said it, but just to reiterate, probably my favorite part across both these games have been combat. The
Mm-hmm.
story has its ups and downs, but combat, when this game is doing something combat oriented, it's usually at its best. When it deviates from combat, it becomes very hit or miss, and that's what we'll kind of
You
get
mean
into
the
here in a
mini
few minutes.
games
But
aren't
combat's good.
the mini games aren't
What
the
are you talking
primary
about?
thing?
I wanted to play Mario Party with the Final Fantasy cast. So
Yeah,
I'm sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves just a
yeah,
tad, but
we'll get there. All right. So next we can tackle, I don't know, kind of the world, which actually this is something that I'm like very interested to get into because I don't know about you, but when we start getting into the, what is it? There's probably like 8 to 9 different sections that you kind of traverse
mhm.
throughout this game. Um, I would say like at first it's well, because they kind of approach it as I remember texting you in a chat that like to me it kind of felt like a Far Cry game, like almost at first. You know how Far Cry is like you have,
Yeah, and a lot of people have hopped on that. It's if Ubisoft made Final Fantasy, and I don't think that's
yeah,
completely fair. But their style for open world, at least initially at face value, looks and feels a little outdated at this point. And just for those who maybe don't know how this game works, you start out with a story beat, kind of a tutorial section, which we can come back to that in a little bit, and then it opens up into its open world pretty quickly. Like if you're thinking about the original game, like the first 5 or 6 hours is you in Midgar. You get out of Midgar, then the whole game kind of opens up on the second and third disc, and you can go anywhere. This game kind of starts there. And I honestly, that felt weird to me. I'll kind of come back to why in a little bit. I didn't actually love jumping in right after Midgar at the start of this new game, but what happens is pretty quickly you get to a point where you find a particular character, Chadley, who opens up the map for you with all the activities. And immediately, as soon as it showed the map and I saw the markers start popping up, my heart kind of sank a
yeah.
little bit. Because one thing about the original game was most of the exploration of the world was just really, it was just that, it was exploration. Like
You
you didn't
didn't
have
know
much in the
about
way
it.
of,
Yeah,
yeah, you had to just stumble across things and poke your nose in places. And I know sometimes lack of a guiding hand can be a bad thing, but also telling you exactly where to go 100% of the time doesn't make for the most engaging exploration. So that definitely took the exploration notch down for me quite a bit, knowing that, oh, well, I got this map. I've got 15 things I need to go walk my way to, and I'd ignore everything else until I get to that map marker. We can talk about the quality of the stuff at those markers here in a minute, but that design where it's just here's a marker, go do a thing, move on to the next thing, and then you're just checking off this list. Wasn't overly keen on that, and I have a pretty high tolerance for that kind of tedium. Honestly, sometimes I do like a game that is just a big checklist, right? I just get to sit down, zone out for a few hours, and yeah, climb a tower, scan a thing, whatever it may be. This game, I think, pushed it for me a little bit, and I was excited to go in and try to 100% everything. And to just kind of jump a little further ahead, I pretty much did. I kind of stuck with that through the
I
entire
did
game.
not. I was not willing to
I
do
and
that.
I was kind of torturing myself towards the later half of it. Like I feel like I was just in too deep at a certain point, and I felt like if I want to talk about this game, I want to feel like I've at least experienced what this game has to offer in the fullest sense. So I did play just about everything besides hard mode. I just couldn't bring myself to
You
do
did all
that.
the
But
you got the
uh,
gold in chocobo racing.
yeah, I did all the
Ugh,
racing. I've done
gosh,
There are a couple of hard mode mini games I couldn't bring myself to do, and we'll talk about those. But yeah, I did it all. I guess my biggest thing though, just looking high level at the world design, it lacked true exploration. Like there was really nothing you could just stumble upon. I really didn't love that. There was none of that Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom
no, it
kind
was
of,
just like go
hey,
to this
what's over
tower,
there?
and then this tower shows you where the four things surrounding it are. And
Yeah.
same pro. Well, I, I feel like the first few times you do it, the first two worlds, I felt like was kind of neat, kind of fun. But then, like you were saying, there's like that existential dread that sets in when you're like, you enter the third or fourth area, and you're like, oh, again with this, and
Yeah.
it kind of gets a
Here's
little
that.
bit better later, in my opinion, because there's a bit of elevation in terms of the location, so they're not just flat and open, but it's still like, I don't know, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I want to mention some of these activities really quick, just in case you're not sure what kind of things you're doing when you get to the world. So I already mentioned the towers. You basically have Ubisoft-like towers where it pops up, and when you activate the radio tower, you see more stuff around you in the world. And not saying that towers are terrible. Like in some games, I really enjoy them, but typically the ones that have those little towers that I have had any kind of inclination to actually enjoy doing, they have some kind of gimmick around. There's like a puzzle to climb
At
the
least
tower,
in at
or
least in Assassin's Creed, you got to like jump off of it at the end.
yeah, there's something extra about it. Like Assassin's Creed, it was even a puzzle trying to figure out how to climb it. Or Breath of the
Mm-hmm.
Wild, like each tower had a different kind of layout you had to figure out. This game isn't that. Like, if anything, it is overly tedious to climb them. There's just ladders that you go up. The climbing animation is super slow. You kind of have to climb every level so you can knock over those boxes to get those Moogle points on if you bothered with those. But
Hmm.
it's a
I did.
tedious process. Yeah,
I think
there's
I
not a lot
got
of enjoyment in the
yeah.
activity. I guess the only thing they do that is unique. Almost all of them have a little fiend battle at the bottom. The fiends are the monsters in the game, so you typically had to have a quick little battle at the beginning just to get access to the ladder, and then you'd climb the ladder. Granted, sometimes you could kind of sneak by and cheese that, but towers were relatively, I think, unengaging. They were just there. Then you had several activities that literally were just QTEs. That's all they were.
Mm-hmm.
The life springs, which you walk around, you find this little, life spring well
You
that
hit
has
it
a
3
crystal.
times. Ding, ding,
Yeah, the
ding.
timed QTE, triangle, 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 and yay! And there are a bunch of those. Like each part of the map is like 4 or 5 of them, and there's like 6 or 7 regions. So you're looking at doing that QTE like 30 to 40 times in the game, and it
And
never gets different, more interesting. Is just a scan.
why exactly did there need to be a different chocobo for each region? Why couldn't you just get one chocobo? I kind of that was something I didn't like, was that you had to go chocobo hunting for every single different region. It's like, why can't you just
Yeah,
I got my
it
one
was so they
chocobo.
could give you an activity. I mean, I know, to be fair, and this kind of goes to like the traversal, which we don't want to table that for just a minute. Like the chocobos, how they made them all different so they could traverse different landscapes was interesting, but the activity of actually catching the chocobos was not
Yeah.
fun at all. Before we get there, I just want to mention there was a whole nother segment of activities that was also just another QTE, the summoning crystals or whatever they were called. It was, I guess, slightly more involved, but it was still just a big QTE, and that made
Yeah.
up a good 4 or 5 activities in each map. So that's
You were
another
just like
30 of
playing
those. So
Simon. You like playing Simon. It's like, remember this,
yeah, so if you do all the activities on all the maps, at least 60 of them are going to be QTEs that aren't overly engaging or exciting. The Chocobo thing, as you were mentioning, are also pretty, in my opinion, frustrating. What you basically have to do in each world is they'd have a new colored Chocobo that would help you traverse that landscape. The first one's your basic, I'm a Chocobo, run around, that's about all he does. Then you get one that can
well, because
climb
you needed
mountains,
to,
and you get one that can glide.
because you got to get through the swamp to get to
Yep.
the creature. I forget the creature from the original game, the snake, whatever it is.
The Midscar, Somar, whatever it is, the big snake.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, honestly, the concept of that is fine, and I want to kind of talk more about the traversal in a moment. But the act of catching the chocobos, did you ever enjoy
No,
that?
it's
It was
boring.
basically like a slow stealth
You
section.
wait for the chocobo to turn slightly, and you just move forward. It's like I don't
It's
know.
sometimes they were pretty frustrating. Like, I don't know, they weren't hard, but they took forever. I felt like maybe it was just because you had to crawl so slow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was a poorly done like Metal Gear stealth section essentially, and just not great. You have to do that, 6 or 7 times based on how many chocobo there are.
This game had a
What
lot.
other things were
I
there?
definitely feel like this game, like, we'll end up coming back, but there definitely needed to be like, you know how people always say Zack Snyder needs like an editor for his movies and he never gets one.
Mhm.
It's like this game ended up feeling like that, where it's like they needed someone to be like, no, you need to
Curate.
trim this a little bit.
Yeah, so just to kind of hit on that point really quick, I will definitely applaud the fact that Square Enix put so many. There is a lot in this game, right?
Oh
And
yeah,
most of it is pretty polished,
we haven't
so
even talked
it's
about the
at no
mini games yet.
detriment. Yeah, it's at no detriment to them that they said they put a huge amount of content in this game. I mean, I spent 108 hours doing everything in this game, something crazy like that. And most, once again, good quality, and it's not like anything was done poorly from a execution standpoint. It was a game design standpoint for most things that were pretty lacking. But there's too much. There so much of this felt like padding at a certain point, and I think it really goes to the question of, does this trilogy need to be a trilogy at this point? Because this game could have been half the length, easy, if they
Hmm.
would have cut some of this filler. It really felt like they were trying to stretch things out just to justify having a second game in their trilogy to fill out that runtime. But curating this would have helped a lot. And I know if some people have said, well, okay, if you don't want to play the content, don't, right? You are a prime example of that. You just skipped all the content and kind of went towards the main story, I know, at a certain point. But I don't think that means that it's good content, right? There are some people
Hmm.
that have a high tolerance for, what, as I mentioned, I just want to check off boxes. I love Final Fantasy. I want to hang out with the characters. I don't really care what I'm doing. That doesn't mean the things you're doing are designed well. I think a lot of people are just going to kind of put their blinders on and be like, I don't care what I'm doing. I just like that I'm in Final Fantasy VII, and ignore everything else that might be a detriment to it. I didn't have those rose-colored glasses as I was going through it. Like I was doing everything, and I was hating myself as I went through most of it. So I don't know.
Well, again,
What are the
like,
side quests or? Go
well,
ahead.
just to no, I'm just finishing that up. It's just like we've talked about like before about like a creator or an artist or somebody valuing its viewer or its whoever's being entertained
Valuing your
valuing their
time.
time, and it's
Mhm.
like there's a lot of stuff here that I'm just like once I started to kind of catch on to how much was there and how deep they were going with certain things, it was just like I'm again when I explored every single area and I got to everything, but in terms of like maxing out everything, I was just like, all right. At one point, I was just like, I'm doing all the main stuff. I don't know,
Yeah.
and I actually say
No, there need to be some heavy curation.
I don't regret doing that. I mean, I had fun just playing through the main game. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, most of it I don't think really rewards you to that extent where you need to do everything. There are a few things I think you might have missed out on that you might be like, oh, that was cool, but it requires a lot of extra investment.
I think
So, for example, like the proto
I
relics,
was
did
just
you
gonna
do
say
a lot
that's
with
the
those?
one thing I missed is I never quite figured out what exactly the samurai guy. Never quite figured out what was going on with him.
Yeah, so I won't go too far down to that. It does lead to this whole like extra region you can kind of go to on the map. It's got like a whole like boss rush mode. Like it's actually where it ends up is pretty cool, but it's another one of those tedious slog ones. The proto relic one was probably honestly one of the more interesting activities you could do because at least it was varied as you went to different regions. Like the first one was chasing down that crazy gang of whatever from the first game. So
Oh
it kind of
yeah,
gave you like
that's
four
right.
different activities where you chased them around to capture a relic. And then I think where it kind of started to lose me is the next region you had to go through and do that Fort Condor mini game.
Mm-hmm.
And man, the mini games, I don't want to get too deep into any of them right now because that's going to be its own talking point. But
Yeah.
that game drove me insane. Like the difficulty balance was not correct. I think they fixed a lot of that in patches, so I guess sucks for me for playing it too early. I don't know, but those were a slog to get through. And
The
then they had
final
another proto
one,
relic section that was
brutal.
Gears and Gambit, another
Mm-hmm.
mini game thing. But at least they were different. Like they would either give different story beats or they'd have a different gameplay mechanic. So I'll give the proto relic chain a pass just because it was at least unique most of the time. Even though I didn't love all the different actions, it was at least trying to do something different, and it had a pretty large payoff if you went towards the whole route of knocking out every proto relic. So I'll give that a thumbs up, I suppose. You also had what else? You had side quests. Did you ever really care for the side quests?
For the side
I didn't think
quests,
most of them were very good.
yeah, those were the ones that were like green markers, right? Like green
Yeah.
exclamation points.
Yeah, like you
No,
help somebody. A
the
lot of them were
main
fetch questy or
the main one I remember was
call it.
the cat one, where at Nibbleheim you go get this cat that used to be Tifa's, and you have it follow
Yep.
you all the way back. That was probably the only one I like really remember. Not really. No, I personally
Yeah,
didn't
most
care
of them
for
are.
any of them.
And your mileage here is going to kind of vary based upon just how much you like that JRPG writing style a little bit, because some of the stuff's a little on the nose or a little overly cheesy or campy sometimes. So you'll have to buy into that humor, and I think that helps to a certain extent. But a lot of the activities are not great. Usually they're like what you oh crap, my brain's blanking on me. Escort missions. A lot of them are like escort
Oh yeah.
missions or fetch quests, and they'd have little mini fights along the way. But that's, I'd say, 80% of the side quests is some form of that. Maybe there's 10 to 20% of them that are unique-ish, or they usually round out in some kind of mini game. Which the mini games, those are going to vary a lot based upon
Before we
the particular game we're talking about.
before we do jump into the mini games, I will say probably the one open world or side questy things I enjoyed was I don't know if we talked about them, but was the fiend challenges, and that's just because, like you said, you're just doing
Yes.
the combat stuff over and over and over, and that's like kind of fun because you're tackling different creatures. I mean, I remember you fought like some sort of like chimera looking thing, and then you're taking on
Yeah, the
different like
Jabberwock,
yeah, those are kind of fun. You type
Marlboro, all that.
what's the big creature? What's the green things that they defeat you in one hit? What are they called? Oh
Oh, the
gosh,
Tomberries.
Tunberries. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think those are probably my favorite activities, just because once again, when this game is doing combat and that's kind of your
Mm-hmm.
focus, it's at its best, and that's what those are all about. It gives you a little challenge, go knock out this fiend. You have so many of them, and then you get rewarded with a bigger boss battle or kind of mini fiend to kind of take down. And those are usually engaging. They had unique interactions and attacks and weaknesses and stuff like that. And those are fun. And you also got good rewards from them too. Like they usually were
Mm-hmm.
how you'd actually synthesize some pretty cool quest items and stuff like that. So no, I agree. Those are really good. Trying to see if there's any other things we're missing. Oh, the chocobo extractions. I hated those. So you had to
Chocobo
ride your
extraction.
chocobo around, and then you had to dig with your
Oh, that's
chocobo. You had a little question
right.
mark pop above your
I
head.
forgot
You
about
had to
those.
hold up until the chocobo just mentally or telepathically figured out where to go dig, and you had to walk over slowly. And I don't know about you, but it was really janky for me getting the
Mm-hmm.
chocobo to line up just right and then dig. I'd miss half the time. You had to do it 3 or 4 times in an area to get everything. Like many of these things, I guess my issue with a lot of these activities, they weren't engaging. Like they were things to do, they weren't fun things to do. Most of them were tedious, overly simple, or just straight up frustrating, depending what you were
And
talking
now
about.
that
As I said, the only
you're
things I think were really go ahead.
no, I'm just saying now that you're bringing that up is just like one thing I'm noticing is that it is a there's not really much speed. There's no haste with what you do with your processes. It's like you're saying like maybe the chocobo hunts or whatever. Maybe those could have been interesting if the process was sped up. Maybe there wasn't like a full on animation of hold down this button to sniff, and then you know what I mean. There's too many.
Animations are
There's
killer
too
in
much
this, man. Like
processes.
they're
Yeah.
slow.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to go pull a lever. You have to hold the button so long to like hold down triangle to pull the lever for 3 seconds. Then he finally pulls the lever in this super slow animation. Then he has to let go so you can get control of the character again. Like there was so much of that that even quick little activities that could have just been okay, press a couple buttons, move on, would have been fine, would have been non offensive. When they waste like 2 extra minutes
Mm-hmm.
of your time watching these animations, it gets old, especially when you're expected to do it X amount of times over and over and over throughout other regions.
I remember one that really annoyed me towards the end was when you were starting to do the cactuar stuff, and like you would have to like
Cactuar Crush.
pull
Yeah.
up you would press a button and you have to like follow the laser to where you have to, there's just too many processes going on there. And then when you get to the cactuar thing, you have to do, I don't remember, I think you
To
did
hold it
another.
up, and you have to.
Yeah, it's just too much.
It was like a 4 part or 4 phase thing. You had to do that multiple
And then it
times.
was fairly fun once
Um,
you got down there and talked to that guy, and you would do more combat stuff with him, and you know, fighting like the 30 cactuars all at once. Like those, that part was fine. But
no, I agree. I'm trying to think if there are any other activities world-wise I'm missing. I had the VR challenges listed here. I don't know if I'd really count those as world activities. I mean, kind of. You open up more as you fight more fiends and stuff.
what's the name of
These
the
are pretty much the
place? It
same
was
as in Remake.
what about
Hmm?
what was on the beach area? Around the beach area, you had all these other different like mini game stuff to do. Like you had to bring all of the carts, wheelie things back to their color designated area,
Oh,
and then you had to do
yeah.
cactuar
Well, those are more.
photos.
Those I think fall under the side quest category more than
Mm-hmm.
anything else. And so the side quests are gonna vary a little. Like I think those in particular are probably the more unique ones. That was maybe the 10 or 20 that I was mentioning that try to do something beyond just an escort or a fetch quest. But as I said, they're kind of few and far between, and usually they're one-offs, right? You have that one section where you have to ride a Segway. You have the one where you have to take pictures of something. But this game does that a lot, actually, which I think some people would praise. I don't really like it. They'll, for this hot moment, introduce like a new gameplay mechanic that you use for 5 minutes and you
Mm-hmm.
never use it again. At least you're never expected to engage with it again. And I guess some people like that. It'd be like, oh, the game keeps throwing new stuff at you. I find that frustrating because I invest my brain power, which I'll be honest, I'm losing some of it, into learning this new mechanic. And then after I say, okay, I figured out how this works, then I never use it again. Like I want to learn a mechanic that I'm going to continually be using throughout the game to, advance my combat ability or my explorative whatever. Like I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that personally. Um, I don't know. I guess that's most of the activities. I think my bigger issue with this, just before we get into the mini games, 'cause I know it's going to be a big conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Coming out of Remake, I really liked how Remake structured the game. It was really linear, which I know typically that's not everybody's favorite thing, but for what Remake did, it worked really well. Like that Midgar section of Final Fantasy VII was a pretty straightforward path as far as what you need to do. Branching off to do a couple little activities and side quests fit that well, and I don't know. It was also more of like almost like a companion simulator too. It was more about
Mm-hmm.
spending time and learning about your people, which I liked that. This game hits really odd pacing when you get to the open world sections because they have like these linear areas that kind of say, okay, here's a linear story segment. You do this thing, open world. Then you go to a new linear segment story thing, another open world. And every time I got to those open world parts, the pacing just kind of died for me.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because once again I was doing every activity, but I don't know. This was not their strong suit. Like this game works best when they are focusing on those story-driven. I hate to say linear because I know a lot of people are going to look at that negatively,
Yeah.
but the game kind of works better when it's kind of pulling you along. When they open you up, at least with the way they've structured their open world, it's not engaging. Yeah, it's a checklist. There's something to do, but not many things worthwhile doing. Like if there would have been some true exploration in there, maybe some more variety with the activities, like I probably would have been more into it. But it kills the pacing for me. And compared to the original game, feels completely off. Like the OG Final Fantasy VII. Like when that game opened up, it was really like this breath of fresh air, right? You get out of Midgar, all the stuff happens with you, on the expressway,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just like, okay, after you've now spent 5 hours in this very tight, constrained area, things open up, and you're like, ah, oh, cool, I finally get to play all the stuff this game can do. That's why I think I felt so weird about Rebirth, because since it wasn't coming like immediately after Remake, that was its own separate game. When I start Rebirth, kind of thrown into this open world, it felt weird. It wasn't that breath of fresh air like I had in the original game, right? It was like, oh, I just go check off boxes. There's no exploration. Like I don't know. It didn't hit the same way, and if anything, I think it was almost a detriment to the pacing of this entire game. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
No, I totally agree. At least with remake, I feel like when it did kind of get to some of the more like it's kind of reiterating what you said, but like I at least felt like when it did get kind of tedious or repetitious, when it would when you start to felt the padding, at least because the game was more linear, as you said, it felt as though there was a reason why it was at least like that. Like one of the main sections
And it
from remake,
pushed you on pretty quick too.
yeah, there was a particular section that I remember felt tedious, which at the time I didn't appreciate, but after playing this one, I'm like, all right, that section wasn't too bad, because there was a section where you had to you Barrett in the group, and you were using like cranes or something to kind of move
Oh
around
yeah.
boxes so that you could traverse through like a
Mm-hmm.
what was it, like a driveway or some sort of
There's a
tunnel.
tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah, so at least like when you're doing that, it's just like in the back of your mind, you're just like, okay, I need to get there, therefore I need to do this. Whereas like the stuff you're doing here that's tedious, it doesn't feel as though, oh, I need to get this thing in order to get to where I need
It
to
doesn't feel
go.
worth
Other than
it,
the chocobo stuff,
and
which
it's
I guess, but
Oh, I want to talk about the chocobo stuff in more detail before we get to the mini games, because this kind of leads to the traversal elements of all the regions. So we already mentioned different chocobo, different region, and they do that because every region introduces somewhat of a new traversal mechanic. Like in the grasslands, it's pretty much you're just on foot, so it's nothing too crazy. But you need a chocobo to cross the swamp, so you have to kind of
mm-hmm.
swim through that. Then they have the it was
I've
Junon
I've got all
next, was
the
that right?
regions. There's grasslands, then there's Junon.
Okay. So Junon added like mountains that you need to climb up or like cliff
Yeah,
faces,
like stuff
and
you
the
had to
chocobo
go. Mm,
yeah, so the chocobo had to be a different chocobo that could climb mountains. It would have probably been nicer if it was just one, all chocobos could do the same thing, because that probably makes sense. But I appreciated that in Junon. It was at least okay. It's a different way to start getting around the world, some verticality. But I don't think it was used exceptionally well. A lot of times, those climbing of the mountain segments were a little. What's a good way to say it? It slowed you down more so than it was an engaging thing. What was after Junon? Was that
I got Junon, then
Corel?
there's Coral, which I think that was the
Yeah.
zip line, right? Wasn't it the zip lining area?
So Corel was split into a bunch of areas because you had like the beach part of Corel, then you had the like Gold Saucer portion. You had North Corel with all the Barrett stuff, the deserty. So you
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of ways to go around there. But yeah, you had the zip lines. You had the the little truck or the dirt buggy you had to drive with
Was that
everybody.
Corel? Oh
It
gosh.
was. It's still technically Corel was big. You had like the
There's
one upper
okay.
section, which was the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you went past that, they had the desert section. It was all still
Mm,
Corel. The Gold
okay.
Saucer was technically part of Corel.
Really? Oh,
Um,
sheesh.
but so I guess what I'm getting with this is like each area had a new traversal mechanic, and I do kind of appreciate that to a certain extent. Like it did keep moving around, the environment's interesting. There were a few though I do not think it worked out well. Gungaga, that place was a nightmare to get through. The chocobo mushroom jumps.
Oh, that's right. Dude, I totally forgot about the mushroom stuff. Oh my gosh.
Man, I blocked it out because so most areas are relatively easy to navigate. Like your map kind of shows you where you need to go. There's not like a whole lot of overlapping paths. You just kind of move your character in the right direction, you get to where you need to go. Gungaga is this multi-tiered vertical nightmare jungle where you can't just like go up to an elevated section and just walk up it. You have to find the correct jumping off platform off a mushroom using a special chocobo to jump to the next portion. And I tell you, that sucked because it wasn't always obvious which mushroom was going to take you where, how far it was going to shoot you. And if you're not really trying to 100% anything, I guess it doesn't matter. But I was trying to get to every nook and cranny to check off all those boxes. And good gracious, it was so frustrating. There were areas that took me like 40 minutes just to find the right mushroom to take me to the right place. And then I realized that the chocobo could grind branches. I don't know if you figured that out in certain areas. So
I have no idea
there's
what you're even
certain
talking
parts where it
about.
turns like a tone or jet. Yeah, it turns to like jet grind radio or jet set radio after a point where your chocobo is grinding over trees and stuff. I don't know. Nightmare place to navigate. Most of the other places in the game, not nearly as bad. And at first I thought I was gonna like that area because your chocobo's jumping over canyons, like, oh, that's kind of cool. Until you realize just how inaccurate it is, and it's hard to kind of, forecast where your chocobo is gonna land. That area sucked.
What's crazy is
Um,
I
after
remember. Oh, good.
no, go ahead.
I was just
I
gonna
was
say
gonna jump to the next read.
what's crazy is that well, I guess we're jumping into Cosmo Canyon, but um,
Hmm.
I remember texting you that I actually found Cosmo Canyon to be my favorite one out of all of them. I remember you saying it was like, or most people were saying it was their least favorite. And again, I think it
No,
goes back.
Gungaga was the least favorite.
Was Gungaga? Oh, okay. No, Cosmo Canyon, I think,
Yeah,
because when you get to Cosmo Canyon, you end up finding a chocobo that's capable of, what was it, like gliding or flight
yeah,
or
you could
something.
glide.
And I felt like the elevation aspect of that because there's like fans and which who put those fans there? I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's like fans everywhere that kind of helps people traverse kind of the area and at least it made it more interesting because you know yes the different spots with the side quest stuff is like on the map, but at least there was like a little bit of like I need to figure out how to get there and I don't know. I felt like
Well, you
that.
also had control over
Yeah.
how to get there. Like honestly, it was the same like thing they were trying to do with Gungaga, but they executed it better. Gungaga, you didn't have any control. You had to find the perfect thing to
Mm-hmm.
springboard you to the next vertical location, which was frustrating. With I'm sorry, my brain started. Cosmo
Cosmo.
Cannon. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, with Cosmo, you just had to get in the air. It didn't matter how you got there. Fan, they had like platforms you could jump off of, and then you had control of the chocobo in the air. You could turn and move. So even if you didn't find the right jumping off point, as long as you were close and you had enough height, you got where you needed to go. So that control helped a lot. And if you really kind of figured out the right places, you could find the right platform, and you could fly across the entire map pretty much. So Cosmo, I think from a traversal standpoint, was a lot better. Cosmo is just like a more interesting section too, but we can come
Mm-hmm.
back to that. And then the last one was Nibbleheim, where you had the weird,
Gosh, what
was it
was the?
Hydro Booster
Oh,
Chocobo? You
that's
could like
right.
shoot out of the water. Which honestly, I kind of liked that
I
one.
kind of
Like
like that
it
one
didn't make a
too.
lot of sense. It didn't make a lot of sense how the Chocobo worked, but it was pretty easy to control. Once again, I had a lot of flexibility on how I got around and getting to the island. So I don't know. I think the idea that they were trying to go with different chocobos, different traversal mechanics in different regions, honestly was probably one of the better ideas. It wasn't always executed perfectly, but I appreciate it. That's probably the one thing that maybe didn't make the whole I had to catch a new chocobo in every region sting quite so bad. Although I didn't like the process of getting the chocobo. I get what they were trying to do there and having the flexibility of, oh, these different chocobos let you do different things in different places. So, I mean, I'll give them that, I guess.
So, and then what was I remembered in Nibbleheim there was a one of the main quests was what was it, the Chocobo Master or whatever? Do you remember that side quest?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Which
yeah, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, I will say like
It was
for
a
some of the,
collectathon.
yeah, well that's some of the stuff I remember more was like some of the more fun side quests. Like that one was there. I remember there was a particular side quest very early on in the game where this guy had lost his favorite Queen's Blood card in like a Queen's Blood game, and you had to go battle a bunch of members trying to find out where his card went. That one was kind of decent.
Yeah.
Which I
I
guess
don't know. Maybe I'm too hard on all the side quests. I'd have to go back and look at them. I felt like as playing them, a lot of them boiled down to, I said, escort or fetch quests. But you're right. There were definitely some that had you do something a little more interesting, or they had you engage with a different type of mini game, which I think that just really depended on how much you liked that mini game to see if that was going to be an intriguing one for you. But I don't know. So I guess all the side quests weren't too bad, but they also weren't all gems.
So, since I feel like now's a good time for us to transition to your favorite stuff that was kind of sprinkled through. No, I won't say sprinkled, like sprayed everywhere all over this game. Was a lot of the mini games. I feel like we'll be here all night if we go through each and every one of these. So, did you want to?
I'd like to mention a lot of them really quick because I spent so many hours playing these.
I feel bad for you.
This is the only consolation I'm going to have here is to be able to vent about
Well,
them.
the most popular thing that people are saying deserves its own game, which, whatever, is Queen's Blood. I feel like Queen's Blood is the big like side quest or mini game thing that's kind of throughout this game, and I will say for me at least, like, and I'm actually the card game guy. Like I like card games, but I don't know. I wasn't really vibing with this one. I didn't understand it quite at first. And I don't know. How about you? What did you first initially think about Queen's Blood?
I liked Queen's Blood.
Really?
I like card games like you do, and I caught on to that one I think relatively quickly. And the fact that it was kind of sprawling, it was basically like a collectathon too. You had cards you could get everywhere and build your own deck. It really was a fairly substantial thing inside the game. Before I elaborate, I just want to mention, in case people don't quite understand why I have such trauma about these mini games, there were 18 different mini games. And when I say 18, it's not like I played mini games 18 times. Each one of these were multi-level. Queen's Blood, I don't know how many times I had to play. Hundreds of iterations of playing these mini games. And it's not that the OG Final Fantasy VII didn't have mini games. I mean, it had the Gold Saucer too, and it had a lot of these very similar or same mini games in there. I think the catch was, one, you weren't forced to engage with them quite as often, or not to the extent that this game really wanted you to kind of like dig into the games. Two, it was also because, once again, that was one full game. The pacing felt better about it. Like, you'd see a game every once in a while, and then you'd move back off and do some main story stuff, or you'd spend a little bit of time in the Gold Saucer and you'd go off, do something else. Like, there wasn't as much everywhere, because once again, that game had a different focus. It was much more narrative and exploration focused. The mini games really were there just as a sidebar kind of thing. It felt like these mini games were front and center. Like, I felt like, and to be fair, I didn't have to play all of them. I know I didn't. I definitely understand that I only had to play maybe each game one time, and then I probably could have moved past them, but it really tries to encourage you to spend a lot of time playing the mini games here, which the OG one did not do. And man, if you go that route, man, this is the worst iteration of Mario Party that I think I've ever played.
I don't. You said it there, but I don't agree. I don't appreciate. Like, if you're gonna throw the mini games in, at least make them not integral to the game. Make them offshoots, stuff that it's like, hey, this is here in case you want to get bang for your buck for your 60-70 bucks, or whatever. But it's like, there were entire sections that were devoted to mini games. It's like, I went the first section or two without playing maybe 2 games of Queen's Blood, and then you get to the cruise liner and you have to play several matches of Queen's Blood just to get through that. And it's like really, man? And then like we get into freaking Red 13 standing on 2 feet playing Queen's Blood. Well, that's just like,
well, the Queen Blood's not in the original, but Red 13 dressing up like a soldier is from the original game.
Is it really? I don't even remember.
That. Yeah.
But
I mean, it was a small thing.
maybe it's because I was just so
Um,
annoyed by having to play that game. I was annoyed by everything.
Yeah, the game once again really. I guess you have to really understand too the definition of integral for some of this. Sometimes there were story sections like the cruise ship you had to play Queen's Blood. Others weren't required, but you definitely were going to miss out on some good content if you didn't, like the
Like
proto
the
relic stuff.
Condor. Condor was a prime.
Yeah, if you want to really go down the whole proto relic thing, which as I said actually has a pretty good reward kind of section at the end of it, you have to go through 4 levels of Fort Condor, which to me that was the worst game. I'm sorry for those who enjoyed that, but I hated Fort Condor. You also have Gears and Gambit, which wasn't as bad, but that was tough. You have to do all of those. Like, it really encourages you if you want to go down that quest chain to do a lot of these mini games. And there's other things too, like the chocobo racing was heavily encouraged if you wanted to
Hmm.
see was it Billy's side quest. There's a lot you had to do there. So once again, it depends on how much you want to get out of the game. If you just want this main story and that's it, yes, you could avoid most of these mini games. I think you have to play them all maybe one time, maybe. I think there's some you probably never have to play.
I think
But if
there
you want to
was.
get anything out of the side content, you've got to play a lot.
There was one I remember. I think out of most of them that I actually enjoyed, which was the one with the creature in the middle, where there was a big creature in the middle, and you kind of
As
surrounded him
Gears
with
and
3 points. Gears and Gambit. Is that what it was called? I don't even know. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that one I actually kind of
So you had little
enjoyed.
robots.
Little robots, and I don't know. At least I don't know. It felt kind of like tower defensey, where you're just
Yeah.
strategy wise sending your I don't know. I kind of find that one kind of fun, but
Yeah, that's the thing about
it
all these. The
overstayed its
mileage,
welcome still to me.
sure. A lot of these games weren't straight up bad. They were fine. It's really you have a quantity issue here more than anything else. Some of them are straight up frustrating, but once again, your mileage will vary with that. I really liked Queen's Blood. I liked the card mechanic of it, the collecting cards, building new decks. And that actually does have a pretty good payoff. If you play through all of them, it has a pretty interesting story with the Shadow Queen and like some ghostly aspiration stuff and
Huh.
like one of the characters gets possessed by the Shadow Queen or whatever the Queen Blood. I don't remember what her name was. There's some fun stuff that happens, but you got to play a crap load of Queen's Blood to get there. Like I don't remember how many matches, like probably 100 Queen's Blood matches easy I played. Fort Condor, that's on the list. I thought that was the worst one. I appreciate the art style of that one a lot. That was where they were all basically their
Oh, Final Fantasy
OG low
VII
poly
OG.
models. Yeah. And I liked the idea of that game. It got pretty unforgiving towards the later
The last
segments of it.
one was brutal. Yeah.
And they once again it was kind of a pacing issue because those were long segments, right? Like each little match took you 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot in isolation, but you do 5 minutes and you get slammed at the end by a relatively unfair mechanic, and you got to do it again and again. You'll easily waste 30 minutes just trying to knock out one segment, which may not seem like a lot, but it gets tedious quick. So Fort Condor was one I didn't love. I didn't even touch the hard mode on that one just because I couldn't bring myself to do it. They had the Dolphin Show one, which is basically the dolphin balloon race.
Yeah, I didn't.
It-
That was whatever.
they didn't make you engage with that one nearly as much, so I guess it wasn't as big of a deal, but it was fun. Did you do a lot with the piano? Did you ever play any of that stuff?
I did a couple of them, but nah, it wasn't something I was super interested in.
I like rhythm kind of stuff, so I had a little bit of fun with that. So you got to go around and play a lot of they weren't exactly the same, but they were the themes for different characters. You had like Tifa's theme, Aerith's theme, Barrett's theme. So if you are a fan of the music in FF7, this is a fun way to kind of interact with it. But the piano game is also a little finicky to figure out the timing on, so
I
your
since
mileage will vary.
I'm looking at it, one I didn't like was the Moogle stuff. I really didn't like
Oh, the
all the
Moogles. So
Moogles.
this one was weird because honestly, it's more of a world activity. You'd find the Moogle huts or Moogle houses, and then they're basically shops that give you
And
different things.
you pretty much, I don't want to say you have to do those, but you get really good stuff from it. So it's
You really
definitely
want
in
to
your
get that
best
shop,
interest.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they were basically Moogle Roundup. You'd have to go into this little, Moogle VR world or dimension. I don't know what it was. And you had little kid Moogles floating around. You had to get behind them in the right position to coax them into the middle corral area. And they were cheap sometimes. Like they'd throw crap at you out of nowhere. They'd double team you. And that one, yeah, a little frustrating. Wasn't the hardest, but definitely I never looked forward to it. What else is here? The Gears and Gambit, which I didn't think it was a bad game. I think I was just really getting over mini games by the time I got to that one because this one comes up later in
It's
the
like
game.
very late. One I'm looking that I actually really enjoyed, just because it's a part of the game, was the parade section.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to that, it's like, it feels like a necessary thing to get through the narrative. I don't know.
And that one maybe mini game like isn't the right category for it. I
Oh, I'm
mean,
missing
it
this one.
is in a
There's one on
way.
screen. You see I forgot about the shooting,
Pirate one.
the
I
shooting
have it on
gallery.
here.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Pirates Rampage.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But no, I think the Junon Parade, that one was more unique. And that part of having to go and like find all the soldiers, be part of your platoon for the. I mean, that was a fun section. I liked that.
I like that one. Well, because that was in the original. Like that. I'm pretty sure that was a thing.
And you only do it once. It's not a mini game that overstays its welcome. And you have to play it 10 more times. I train for it, get my members, and then I do my performance, and that's the end of it. So those kind of things are fine. But a lot of these are not one and done. Like Gears and Gambit, minimum 4 times. Chocobo racing, depending what you want to do with that, there's like, goodness, 50 races. I don't know. There was a lot. Yeah, and the races are fun enough. They're very Mario Karty. You have like items you can shoot at other people and boost, and the tracks are fun, but they wear thin after a while. There's only so much variation in them, and after you do 30, 40 of them, you're pretty much done. But I did all of them, so the G-Bike Simulator, that wasn't too bad. It was basically a repeat of what you did in Remake, escaping on the expressway. And they were fun. I don't think do them all. You only have to do it like 3 times, so that was okay. Did you do the Galactic Saviors one where you're like the spaceship?
I actually like that
kind
one.
of
It felt like like a old school SNES, like what do they call them? Shooters. I forget what they call them.
shmups?
Shmups. There you go. Yeah, it felt like a shmup.
Yeah. Wasn't quite a shmup, but it was kind of like that. Yeah. What else? The 3D Brawler. How'd you like that one? We
3D
had the
brawler.
little polygonal. Yeah, they had the polygonal
Oh,
FF7
I remember the
guys, and
fighting.
you had to
Yeah,
choose when you were ducking, when you were dodging.
I didn't like that one. It felt like that kind of felt like you were playing Punch Out. It's like
Yeah,
crappy Punch Out. I didn't like. I
it
felt
got
like it was
tough.
it was fun like in the main narrative because they make you do it to beat
Yeah,
gosh, I can't remember that guy,
Dio.
but Dio. But like there, it was fun. But I definitely didn't want to go out of my way to like do it anymore. But
Yeah, there's like 6 levels of that. You end up just gotta spoil it. You end up fighting like a little version of Sephiroth at the end, and he's hard. It's hard to read him. Like maybe I'm just bad at it, but knowing when they're gonna go high versus low versus whatever. At the end, they're throwing all their arms at you. It got pretty intense. I mean, not a bad concept, but it got tough. We mentioned the Moogle Roundup, Cactuar Crush. That was the one we had to go underneath the old reactors and fight the X amount of Cactuars.
yeah,
I
those were
liked
fun.
that one.
Well,
Yeah,
I
they were
liked.
challenging. You had to pick the right build for your character to succeed on them.
Well, I like those because they kind of force you to kind of like learn the skill set of a different character. Whereas like I don't know when I'm playing these games, I tend to stick with just Cloud or something. But there it was at least fun because it kind of like forces you to this is how Aerith how to use her with her what was it she would put down like
The different wards.
wards on the ground and stuff. Yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah, man, I loved Yuffie. She's one of the ones you have to play with in that mini game. Yuffie is like my favorite character. Like she has some really cool like combat abilities from range to close up. But yeah,
I always like Barrett, but Barrett's kind of like for some reason he's like super weak, even though I like his like skill set.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to go back and beat it, but going back to the combat, all the characters are very unique. They all have really fun kind of combat abilities and stuff like that. Like it takes a while to learn each one, but if you do take the time to like, I want to kind of be a main Barrett guy, there's a lot you can do with Barrett if you really dig into their combat trees and systems. So once again, a boon to the combat. The sit-up thing. Did you do little sit-up challenges? That was a quick one. Just in that gym and corral.
I don't think I touched that one.
You didn't find the gym and corral like towards the beach?
No, not at all. That doesn't sound
Do you
familiar.
remember from Remake the gym where you had to
Yeah.
have the it wasn't sit-ups, it was something else you did in that game. Push-ups?
Might have been.
It was sit-ups.
I don't even
Pull-ups?
remember. I know what you're talking about though. Back in Midgar. Midgar, I think there was a gym.
Yeah. It's the exact same gym, same guys. They just set up shop there and you have a sit-up challenge. Like it was fine. I mean, it was a nice callback to Remake if nothing else. And I don't know, that particular mini game didn't rub me too raw. Desert Rush, that was the one with the boxes. Yeah, the boxes where you had to get points and you get some that extended your time. Do you remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
It was in the Dust Bowl area.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And that one was fun. I think they had a version of that in Remake too. Pirates Rampage of the Shooting Gallery.
That one I kind of
How you
like,
feel
but
about
it's
that?
just like shooting galleries are. It's hard to mess those up.
Yeah, agreed. How about the Fall Guys Jump Frog?
Fall Guys jump. Oh shoot, I
You
forgot
turn to
about that.
frogs,
Yeah,
and they had two of them. I don't know if you played both, but they had two mini games. One was I can't remember the name of it in Fall Guys, but the rotating panel where you're on like a column, you have to jump
yeah.
over the
Mm-hmm.
spinning pillars. And the other one where like the pillar is rotating sideways, you have to jump between the different segments or you fall through. It was straight Fall Guys ripoffs, which I thought
Yeah,
was
funny.
hilarious. But I mean those are fun if you like Fall Guys. I mean, yay. The Chocobo gliding, where you had to, and Cosmo, where you had to
Cosmo.
like go down and catch all the points.
Yeah, I didn't do a heck of a whole lot of that. That wasn't something I delved into very much.
If you're trying to get them, perfect, they were a little frustrating, but you know, they were, I guess, inoffensive enough. Then we mentioned the Junon Parade, which I said that's more of a story beat than a mini game. And the last one is Run Wild. That was the one you had to play as Red 13. It was basically Rocket League with Red.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. That one was kind of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's
I
simplistic and it all. I mean, you're bringing up these comparisons of what they play like, and it almost feels like whoever came up with these ideas was just like, I like these games, let's throw them in there. Or somebody had
yeah,
played Witcher and they're like, oh, Witcher has a cool card game that
card game. Yeah,
people just want to play by itself. Throw that in there. I don't know. Not accusing
and
anyone of anything,
honestly,
but
it may be. And I'll tell you, I think going back through these again, like a lot of them aren't bad games. A lot of them are fine. There are a few that are straight up infuriating. There are a couple that are really good, and there's a lot that are fine. They have enough enjoyability to them. I think the issue once again is just how much you want to you need to interact with them to get the best content. Like if it was just every once in a while, oh, now the game wants me to play a quick piano game. Okay. Now the game wants me to be red in a soccer field. Okay. If it's like every few hours I get hit by something like that. But you'll get to these dumps in the game, like they'll drop you into Corel at the beach, and it's like, okay, you need to play like 8 mini games before you can leave this area. Or they get you to the gold saucer. Same thing. You got to sample every mini game here before you can move on. So that's where I think this really got grating. And if you come back and try to polish up, you're playing mini games the entire time, and it was a lot. I would say, man, 30 hours at least of my game was mini game
not
focused.
me.
Maybe more. I don't know. Yeah. And I said, I know I didn't have to. Some things I'm glad I did. I said the payoff for Queen's Blood and the Proto Relic stuff. I mean, there's some worthwhile things there. Is it worthwhile enough to try to just explore every minigame and see if you get that payoff? No. So, I don't know. Curation would have helped a lot here. Focus some of this, make some of these mini games truly optional. Oh, I guess I didn't even mention some of the battle arenas. There's several of those. I mean, I guess those aren't really mini games in the same way, but they are activities like the Musclehead Arena. Do you remember that one? And the Gold Saucer,
Yeah.
and there was also Dust Bowl. So I don't know, but those are combat focused. I like combat, so those didn't bother me.
Again, I guess kind of finishing my thoughts with all the mini games. I still will kind of revert back to original Final Fantasy VII. It's just like, at least with the original game, it was able. I don't even know. Like, kind of looking at the remake and rebirth, it's almost crazy to think that the original game was able to have maybe not 18 mini games like this one had, but it had several, maybe 7 to
They
10.
had a lot of these.
And it's like
Yeah.
they were able to put all of those into a super fun. What, that game probably maxed 80, 100 hours, I'm sure, probably similar to this
Oh, it
one.
wasn't even that. That was like a 50-hour game, maybe 60 if you really
Yeah,
put a lot
but you
into
were
it.
able to get a full-fledged narrative, and you were able to get all, what, it had Knights of the Round, and it had all the mini games,
Yeah.
anything you could want, chocobo racing, and I don't know.
This game is milking. It's milking everything.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's worth it. I really feel like, especially knowing where the story ended this time, they could have cut this game in half and probably finished up the entire thing in one game. Like we only had a trilogy. This could have been a sequel. Like I'm okay with where Remake left off at. They could have kept this game and done Rebirth and whatever the third game is going to be now. not stretch this game for 100 hours. And I'm sure, I don't remember what the third one's going to be called. I know they already have the name, but I can't imagine spending 100 more hours in this game, to be completely
When you
honest. But
really think about where this game starts and where it ends, now that I think about it, it's like really? That's as far as you got with. I played what 50 hours, and I don't know. I mean, it kind of when I initially played Remake, I thought that this second one was going to end with spoilers, ends with the moment, the death, and
yeah.
I was expecting that, but for some reason, I don't know. After finishing this game, it's just like it's like
Well, the
it took
pacing
50
just feels
hours
so
to get there.
different here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels a little more meandering. Yeah, I don't know. The pacing feels odd to me, and I think I'd almost have to sit down. I think need probably want to go back and play the OG version again just to really refresh myself. But I didn't have these same pacing concerns. I think part of it once again was when you left Midgar in the first game, like the OG version, you were a lot more willing just to kind of branch out and see where the game took you. So maybe the pacing felt a little more fluid at that point. This game just starting right here at the end of Midgar felt weird being in this
Okay. Do we
open
want to
section
just
out of
jump
nowhere.
into the story since you're kind of we're starting to talk about that?
Well, okay, I'm sorry. One thing I want to just throw out here
All
before we
right.
shift
Okay.
off the world stuff. I don't know if you didn't play Final Fantasy 15, did you?
Yeah, I did. But I think I did the same. I just finished
With the regalia and all that.
Yeah, I just finished the main story, and I didn't do a lot of side stuff again with that one.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe this won't be as clear cut for you then. But
The only side
I
stuff I
actually
did
liked
was
15.
beat the giant turtle. I think that was the only side thing I was like, I had to do. What was that?
I guess the reason I bring it up, and not that 15 was perfect by any means, it had plenty of issues, but I liked a lot of the stuff you could do in the world a lot better. They felt more unique. Once again, they didn't have like checkboxes. Like I wasn't climbing towers and stuff. They had some like repetitive things. Like, do you remember the strongholds you had to go take down? Like, you had, like
Oh
these
yeah.
forts you had to
Mhm.
go. So you had those, which I thought those were fun. They were engaging. You had some combat, you had some stealth. Like you had different things you could do in them. Their dungeons, some of their dungeons were intense. I don't know how far you got into those, but they were multi-tiered
I
dungeons
don't
with the
remember
unique
how
combat
far I got.
encounters. And like they had one. It's like a really special. It's almost like a labyrinth puzzle dungeon. It was like a 2 hour long dungeon with like crazy like platforming and puzzles. Like I guess what I'm getting at this is that game had some really unique activities in the world. You had those big, huge boss fights, the giant adamantoids you had to take down. It
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like their fiend challenges, but I almost like the way Final Fantasy 15 did it. I don't want to say better, but a lot of those stood out for me. Like I'll never forget some of the battles in 15. So
I remember the
I guess what I'm
section
going
with
with,
the behemoth was really cool.
yeah. So I don't know. Not trying to say that this game is worse or better than Final Fantasy 15. There's a lot of things you can knock down for both these games, but I feel like they completely just wrote off what Final Fantasy 15 did with its open world, and I feel like that was a little short-sighted. Like there was some really
Mm.
cool stuff that 15 did that I wish would have popped its way back into this. I know 15 had a more empty world, partially because you had to take a car to traverse the whole thing, but I don't know. And honestly, 15 was still the only true open world. Final Fantasy 7 is not really an open world now. Like Rebirth has like open hub sections, but it doesn't feel like a cohesive open world. I guess towards the end you get the Bronco and you can drive around and like you know, take the boat version of it and get around. That makes it a little more cohesive, but not really. It still feels very segmented. So I don't know. I just want to throw that out there. If you haven't played Final Fantasy 15, I'm not saying you have to run out and play it, but there are some interesting things it does in the world that I wish they'd kind of re-implement over here in 7 to a certain degree.
I'm telling you, because you like the combat stuff with modern Final Fantasy so much, you really got to play 16. I feel like 16, that's its strong point, is like the cutscenes, which primarily are like butt mashing monster battles, and then the other
Mhm.
stuff is like just normal combat, like the typical, and
I'm
it.
sure I'll like that. I think my issue every time we talk about it, that always takes me out of it, is I know you lack a lot of the RPG elements in it.
It,
You don't
it
have
does,
your
yes.
party system. You don't have you can't switch members. Like, and those are little things. I think I'd probably enjoy the game for what it is. I'd have a hard time associating it in the same way to some of the Final Fantasy stuff as I do these games. But that's a different
Yeah,
conversation. I
yeah,
definitely need to
totally
play
different.
that one at some point.
Now, again,
All
that's
right.
another one where our buddy MetalGamer, like, I think he literally just finished it, like like
Yeah.
a
But he
couple
loved
weeks
it. I
ago.
remember that.
Yeah, it's fun. Okay, so
One day.
since I think all we got left is just story to kind of. I think you were starting to branch off. You were starting to go into the direction of talking about where this picks up from remake.
Yeah. So this game starts off with the Nibbleheim flashback where Cloud's kind of, telling his buddies what happened in Nibbleheim, which is a fine enough opening. I don't know. I still felt a little weird about it. I really think it started sinking in after the first couple hours of this game how awkward it feels to have all of remake and where it ends kind of as its own thing, and then just pick up right here in Nibelheim. Like I've heard some people say that this is their first Final Fantasy game they've popped into, and that's a terrible
That's a
idea. Do not
terrible.
play this game if you haven't played remake.
Yeah.
They're not separate games. Basically, think of remake as disc 1 and rebirth as disc 2. So you have to be able to connect those pieces. And maybe if I would have played remake a little more recently and then went right into rebirth, maybe I wouldn't have felt so weird. But having that 4-year separation and then just bam, I'm starting Nibelheim. I don't know. It felt almost like too brash of an intro. I don't know. I mean, it was big. It was a fun tutorial, and yeah, you got Sephiroth there, but I don't know. It just felt odd as an intro to the game for me. I don't know. Did you feel like that at all, or did you like the way it started out with Nibelheim? I mean, it's impactful, I guess, but
The game started out with Nibelheim? I don't even remember. My
oh, okay.
blanking
It
already?
technically started out.
It
It
starts
technically
out with
started out with Zack.
Zach.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. That's
but
what I was
that like was
thinking.
such a quick thing, though. That was like what? Not even an hour.
Which that's something we'll have to get into is like
The Zack stuff.
was
Yeah.
Zach like what was the point of I don't know.
Okay. Well, we'll get to
There's
Zack. So you do start with Zack in an alternate dimension.
and there's other
Or
cameos from other
timeline.
Final Fantasy characters and it's like you couldn't do
Yeah.
more with that. I don't know. I feel like because
Either way.
they had the idea of the branching timelines and the spirit world crossing whatever that place was called. Like I feel like they were just trying to make it seem worth it, and it's just like it ended up being more
Well,
kind
we're
of
in a
confusing.
weird spot. Yeah, we're in a weird spot with this story because, like, so remake ended with this realization. Okay, there's different timelines. At least that's how they're trying to thread it out. I don't know if it was quite as obvious in remake that they were definitely different timelines, or if the main timeline just changed.
And
But a character who had
you're dealing with Sephiroth, who knows he loses in one timeline, attempting to affect another one because
maybe like this game does recontextualize that a little bit, as far as what Sephiroth knows is going to happen versus what he doesn't. But regardless, there's some time shenanigans happening. So
yeah,
you find that end of remake, and there's characters that were dead in the original OG 7. This character Zach we're talking
Doc
about.
Brown shows up for a
Find out,
minute.
yeah, and you find out at the end of remake that that character is now alive. So it opens up to the time could change, or the story beats that were fate in the OG game may not actually play out the way they did. So I think that was a fun premise, and it kind of got theory crafting kind of going after that original game, but it didn't give you a lot to really have to worry about yet, if that makes sense. Like it was a fun little, this is kind of what we're gonna do, and left it at that. Now we're in this portion of the game where they're doing weird stuff that doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet, and it has no resolution. So we're kind of in this weird spot where we're trying to understand, okay, is this just weird because it's weird? Are they doing something that's going to pay off? Is this just not going to pay off at all? It's feeling very Kingdom Heartsy, which is a dangerous territory to be in. I mean, it is Nomura, so I mean that's kind of the realm we're going in. But it's hard to tell how some of these story threads are going to pay off because they are very much now into the multiverse, multi-timeline thing. And that's just, it's a tricky thing to play well and to make sure everything lines up and makes sense. But I don't know. I'm probably getting a little too deep into that.
I never quite figured out throughout this game, is Sephiroth actually there? Because they always
No,
show that whenever
he's
he's doing something, he takes the form of a whisper and everything. And whenever he shows up, it's just like, are they actually dealing with him, or is he just working through Cloud?
Worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's there, but he's not.
Him and Aerith are in the same place. They're like in that world, like you're saying, world between worlds type thing.
Kind of. I think you're jumping way too deep into this.
I'm just
kind of
throwing my confusion out there.
No, and it is confusing. I think that's one of the issues with this game is it is in this confusing
So,
spot
so,
that
so real quick, because you brought up Kingdom Hearts, do you feel like this game could be going down the route where when I first played Kingdom Hearts 1, I remember one thing you kept saying was don't try to understand anything. Do you feel as though this game could be going down that route where it's like you probably shouldn't
it
look into anything too deep?
well, yes and no. Like it's hard because there's a lot of misdirection, I'm sure right now. At least maybe not misdirection, but you don't know which things you should pick up on that are going to lead to a satisfying conclusion right now. I think it's going to be one of those things you get to the end of the third game and they piece everything together. So part of me is just like, yeah, just go with it. I mean, if you're still invested in this story, just be like, okay, it's weird. Let's see where it pays off. I think where it's gonna be different with Kingdom Hearts, like Kingdom Hearts, like towards the end of its story, I still don't feel like wrapped up everything super well. Granted, that was a much more
It
convoluted
wrapped
story
something
in
up.
general.
I didn't even know
Yeah,
3 tried to wrap anything up.
3 tried like the last hour of the game it tried, but anyway, this game I think I will hope that the third game will definitely bring some cohesion to everything. If not, I am gonna feel fairly underwhelmed if this tries to branch off to oh now we're gonna do another game on this or spin-off or something. I don't know. I'll hate that, but I don't know. I would say just go with it right now. I
Okay.
mean, I want to talk through some of the theory stuff with you in a minute and kind of get your perspective on it, but yeah, I think you just have to be okay with where it's at right now and just go with the flow.
Hmm.
But anyway, so yeah, it opens up with Zack, and let's kind of table Zack for a moment because he is an odd one. But yeah, then it hits Nibelheim. Yeah, that's kind of like the open tutorial. We have Cloud and Sephiroth. That's within the first like 3 or 4 hours of the game. So I guess
Hmm.
that's why I still think it's like the beginning. I guess that's just weird. That's such a big pivotal moment. Like when you come out of the original game, getting out of Midgar and then having that revelation, like, that's really the first time Sephiroth was portrayed as this big evil entity. Like in the original game, was mostly just focusing on how evil Shinra was. Sephiroth was kind of an afterthought later.
Yeah,
This
you
game
don't really
though
deal with
paced differently.
Sephiroth. You don't deal with Sephiroth really until he kills the Shinra dad. Like I think in
Yeah,
the Shinra main headquarters.
right at the end of the Midgar section, and then you kind of go into Nibelheim, and it makes sense. This game just feels a little odd. Like once again, because remake is separate. So being so separated from remake, just starting there, I don't know, felt weird to me. I want to keep hitting that dead horse, and I don't know if I can even fully, rationalize why it felt weird. I just didn't love that intro. But anyways, you come on Nibelheim, and then you're in Calm. Right? That's that little town nearby where you do a couple of tutorial things to learn
So I
how
say that
the
again.
systems work. They introduce you to Queen's Blood, a few
You
little
cut out
things
for a
like
sec.
that. Oh, I'm sorry. After Nibelheim, you end up in Calm, that little
Oh,
town
that's right.
nearby where
Yep,
they,
calm. Yeah.
teach you about Queen's Blood and a few other things. You have to escape really
You deal
quick.
with the
And I
guy
thought that
that
was fine.
you deal with the guy that used to be a soldier, and then
A
he's
soldier.
like going through. So I remember actually he had like a side quest, didn't he, where you were bringing him like medicine or something, and then later on in the game, he
Yeah, he's
turns out he
going
becomes
through.
becomes one of the hooded beings, whatever they're called.
What do they call it? Not decomposition. What do they call it when like they have the
Degradation,
Mako? Yeah,
degradation.
degradation. They have the
Yeah.
Mako poisoning. Yeah. So he's going through that. But I mean that was a quick section. That was fine. It kind of sets things up for you. And then you end up in the open world, right? You go to the first Chocobo stop, you find Chadley, and then it's bam, world is open. And that's once again I think the pacing kind of gets weird, but we've already kind of talked about that. So there's a lot of little narrative beats that change throughout this whole game, and I don't know if we want to go through the entire story here because I think we'll be here for a long time, but
Oh yeah, no,
I
I
kind of want
agree.
to hit on some of the things they changed, and they started to change this stuff pretty early on. Um, so for one thing, in the original game, when you were getting out of the grasslands, kind of going to the next section, you had the swamp you had to traverse, right?
Hmm.
And the whole point about the swamp was you can't just walk through here because you're too slow to get away from the giant snake, the Midsommar or whatever it was. So in both games, it was got to get Chocobo, got to get through. In the first game, that was all you did, where you got the Chocobo and you got past the snake, right? And then you saw him like impaled later on by Sephiroth, but you didn't actually fight him.
In this
I
one,
think
you
you
can't.
could fight
You
him if you want to.
Well, in this one, you can't
This
get
game
the
forces you
chocobo,
to fight.
but you can't even get the chocobo to start because you have to do all these like side quests for this two young people running this chocobo place, and that takes a bit of
Right.
time just to even get the darn thing.
Well, I'm not so much worried about that. I'm talking about the beat here that changes. So in the original game, you had a choice, right? You could
Mm-hmm.
you could kill the snake actually. If you somehow were good enough, you could walk in there, fight the snake, and get by it. Or you had to run by it. That was the spot you were supposed to take, right? Because you got the
Mm.
chocobo, it would be faster. This game doesn't give you that choice anymore. And that's something you're going to find a lot. This game removes a lot of choice from the original game. So in this game, you get the chocobo, thinking you're just going to outrun the snake, but you're forced to fight the snake. And at the end, Sephiroth still shows up and stabs him and, skewers him on the tree or whatever. But I didn't like that because I felt once again that a choice that I had in the original game was kind of yanked away from me. A few other instances of that, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, you do get some extra characters that join you in this game, right? You end up getting Yuffie, you get
Yuffie.
Vincent, you get Sid,
Yeah.
you get Kate Sith, you get a bunch of them. My issue with that is both Yuffie and Vincent are supposed to be optional in the first game. You can miss them if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
This game, you're forced to get them both, and not even like in an interesting way. Like Yuffie, at least they kind of draw out her story a little bit. Like they tried to incorporate her more into the narrative. So I guess I get that. But like Vincent, you used to have like solve a puzzle to even figure out how to get into his room to unlock his crypt inside of the OG game. Like he was completely superfluous.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I feel kind of sad they've yanked that optional thing away. Like I guess my issue with this game is there's not a reason to explore anything, to get extra stuff. And now they've even removed more reason not to explore.
The
Does
only
that make sense?
the only reason I had to explore was there was the purple chest that gave you a new weapon type
Weapons.
for whatever character it was
Yeah.
tied to. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah, it just felt like a shame because that was something the original game did that was one about giving you some different exploration options. You could stumble upon how to get Yuffie, stumble upon how to get Vincent, and it gave you a reason to poke your nose in places and learn things and read little, notes about how to find a key code somewhere. And that's just gone because like the game's just like, okay, here's your new character, here's your other new character, and the game does that a lot. It's kind of what Remake did too. That kind of curates and structures a very linear kind of path forward in the narrative, and sometimes that works better. Those are a few instances I didn't love. There's other story beats too that are adjusted to a similar extent, but I don't know. I didn't love those, so I won't go too deep down it. But there's a few things I wasn't a
There
huge
was a
fan of.
now that I think about it, there was a couple sections I felt like were not necessary or ran on too long. Like you were bringing up the battle with the the mid Gramar or whatever, the snake. Immediate,
I don't remember, Midsommar.
immediately after that, there was an entire section that takes place in a mountain or cave system, and that went on forever. And the whole purpose was
Yeah,
just for you guys just to regroup because half of you fall down, or it's just like an entire. And then at the end, you just ends in a battle with the Turks, and
yeah.
now that I think about it, the Turks, like, how many times did you have to beat them before they're like, okay, we're never gonna be.
But
You probably fought them like
no.
4 times in this game.
Now, to be fair, the original game had a lot of these same beats. You did go through the mine, you did fight the Turks and do stuff. The problem is, you're right, they take these sections and they really pad them out. Like the mines in the original game was this quick little thing. You just kind of climb
Mm-hmm.
through, do a couple fights, and then you're out. This was a multi-tiered dungeon where your party gets split up. You have to play as both halves of the party to get to where you have to be at. And the game does that a lot. What is it? Gongaga is probably the worst offender of that. They have the first half of you going to the reactor where it's just Cloud and Barrett, I
Oh, and
think,
then
and
you have
one
to do it
other,
again with Aerith, and yeah,
with Tifa and Aerith and Yuki. Like, it's like, why? Clearly for padding. Like, that could have been half of the length. And
mm-hmm.
they do that multiple times throughout the story, splitting up your party, make you play as different
It gets
versions of them.
it gets really bad
Towards the
too
end,
at the very end with when you're in
mm,
the what
the
is it the
visions or
Citra
trials.
place. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, so once again, that kills pacing. And this is where I keep going back to, like, this game just has too much. Like, yeah, it's cool that you put all this content in here, but it's quantity over quality. And when I say quality, I don't mean that it's not polished. Like, it is good, functional gameplay, I guess, but it's not enjoyable or necessary. It takes a section and stretches it for the sake of stretching it, and not to the benefit of anything narrative, too. Like, I feel like when remakes stretch something, usually it's because they were fleshing out a character or a side quest or some weird little thing that may have been a throwaway character in the original game, but they wanted to give a little more meat to in this. They spend some time with that, and that's fine. Game doesn't do that. It's not that I'm fleshing out another character. I'm just repeating more of this gameplay dungeon just to pad out time. So lots of that. And I know it's not really story. That's still, I guess, world design to a certain extent, but it impacts the story. It impacts the flow of progression. And it really, honestly, those big narrative sections felt so far from one another that, I don't know, it was almost exhausting trying to get to the next story beat sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and there was also one that took place with at least the one the little side area with Red 13. At least it had like a pretty good payoff with you kind of learning what happened to his parents and introducing you. What I just thought about it, but was that race that battled
The
against the
geek.
Citra, was that in the original game?
So yes and no. So the whole Red 13 story was in the original, and
Oh,
you
of
do
course.
learn about that.
Yeah.
Um, the Gi, I believe you learn about the Gi. You do not have that whole dungeon after Red 13's thing where you have to go fight these Gi ghosts, whatever they
Ghosts,
are.
yeah,
And
trial or whatever. A long
that went
time.
on too long. So it's, I don't know. Like they add stuff, which at least that was trying to do something to flesh it out, but I
I
think it
will
just went on an
I will
hour
say
too
the
long.
final boss of that section was one of probably my favorite final boss of the entire game. I don't remember what he looked like. I can pull him up real
The
quick.
Gi?
Yeah, the Gi final boss.
I think the last thing I fought was it was like 3 of them all together. There was a fight after that.
Oh gosh, there was a
Oh, okay, yes, I remember what you're talking about now. At the end of his trial.
end of
Okay,
his trial. Yeah,
okay,
I have
I'm
to
with you now.
figure out where the heck. I don't know. But yeah, no.
Yeah, no, I remember.
Oh well, I'm never. Oh, I'm on the play. Do we want to talk about
On
the
that
play?
list.
I actually kind of
Um,
liked. I actually feel like the Gold Saucer was. I didn't like some of the stuff that took place like after Gold Saucer, because then that became, what was it? You were looking for the guy that had shot up,
Dying.
tried to kill people. Oh, I hated that section with Barrett. That was so overly dramatic, and a lot of the Barrett stuff I
Yeah,
find annoying. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I think this goes to how well you. What's it? How do I want to phrase this without coming across weird? Um, it is overly dramatic. You have to kind of appreciate that style of storytelling. It's very Japanese in certain
Yeah,
ways, and sometimes it doesn't always translate super well. Because I mean, I think Barrett's story is honestly it's pretty tragic. I mean, the whole thing if he's basically the reason his town got demolished and his best friends died, and he's raising his kid and is never gonna see his kid. Like, it's sad. But you're right. Barrett is very melodramatic about stuff. The dying thing, I don't know. I thought played a little weird. I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle on that story. I also did not love it, but it was part of the original. It played relatively close to how the original did. I just didn't enjoy the gameplay aspect of it. I don't know.
I definitely think at some point maybe this year I want to replay the original. It's been a hot minute since I've done that, and I feel like that could, I don't really give me a better perspective on kind of how I feel about these ones. Maybe it'll like me. Maybe it'll make me like these more or less. I'm not quite sure.
I mean, there is an appreciation when you say, "Oh, this is from the original game," so that's nice. But I think then you also bring up the comparison. Okay, is this better than what they did in the original game? And like remake was weird because most of the game was pretty one to one. So there wasn't a lot of, oh, they changed this thing. I don't like the way they changed it until the end when the whispers started to become like a big issue. This game takes some liberties pretty early on with stuff, and sometimes it's even like small little writing changes. Like one thing about Dying, is at the end of the original, he basically drops off the edge of a cliff, like he commits suicide at the end because he can't bring himself to let his daughter see him this way. Um, this game, he dies by kind of sacrificing himself for Barrett, but then he gives this really crappy move to Barrett. He's like, "Don't you forget how terrible a person you are. This guilt needs to live with you forever," and then he just keels over. Like,
Hmm.
it kind of hurts Dine's character a little bit because in the original, he was almost kind of releasing Barrett a little bit. I think his last thing was some message to Marlene, like "Take care of Marlene" or something weird like that. In this game, he's basically giving the ultimate middle finger to Barrett for the rest of his life because he just offs himself afterwards. I don't know. Um, I don't know. So little things like that they change, which I don't necessarily think are for the better, and kind of make those original moments sit kind of weird now. So
No.
I guess to your point, yeah, play the original again. That'll probably help you have some perspective. I think you'll appreciate the inclusion in this game, but I think then you'll question the execution on some of it a little bit.
Hmm. So I guess since we're kind of, I don't know, rounding the bases here, but I had another question. Because for me at least, I don't know, I didn't really feel like this game really drew me in until, gosh, until maybe, oh, that's right, Gongaga. When
The
I feel like
Gaga reactor.
when you get to the Gongaga reactor and then you start kind of seeing the life spring or whatever with Aerith and
Mhm.
kind of seeing more in depth stuff about Sephiroth, I feel like that is when, at least in my opinion, the narrative kind of kicks up a tick. And
Yeah.
I calculated it. That was probably something like 25 hours into the game, at 25 to 30, and it's like, how about you?
And this is the pacing issue.
Did
Yeah.
you feel as though it took that long for you to really like kind of get drawn into what the game was trying to do?
Yeah, and I say a lot of this is pacing, because a lot of the story beats once again are very similar to the original. The Gungaga has actually changed a good amount, but as far as the beats that you follow, it's pretty much in line. But the original once again didn't have this pacing issue. Like you got out of Midgar, and a lot of these things just kind of happen quickly. Like okay, I go through the Nibbleheim flashback, I quickly am in Calm, then I'm immediately moving over to Junon. Like things flow a lot more naturally because you don't have all this dead time with all these extra world activities. This game, I know you stopped kind of doing it after a while, but up to Gungaga, weren't you still doing most of the activities?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, I was moving
I'm
around.
sorry, up until Gungaga, you were still doing a lot of the world activities, right?
Yeah, I think I stopped at around that time. I think that's when I stopped
That's
doing the.
probably a that's probably a big part of what killed that narrative pacing because you'd get this little chunk of narrative and then you'd have what 3 to 4 hours at least of world content you have to do, sometimes more, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'd have another little segment of narrative content, 4 more hours of world stuff, and like that just kills the flow. And now if you realize what that's doing, you ignore some of the side content, it doesn't feel as awkward. But once again, this game's kind of at odds with itself. Does it want you to do the side content because it does have stuff that you want to investigate, or should you just stick with the narrative? But I agree, Gongaga is kind of where things got more interesting, and partially because that's one of the bigger story changes. Like most of that stuff did not happen in the OG version, with Cloud trying to straight off kill Tifa and then her get eaten by a weapon. Like weapons aren't even supposed to show up in this game, really until the third game if they're going at this pacing. So weapons shouldn't have even been on the table. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of story changes there. And you could argue if they're bad story changes or not. I once again I was going with the flow. For those big changes, I relegated myself long ago to be like, let's just see what happens. They're gonna do some weird stuff. Let's see how weird it gets. That section got pretty weird. With her being stuck in the materia belly, basically going
Yeah.
all Jonah or Pinocchio on
Yeah.
everybody. Um, and then she had her flashback visions, which she actually is supposed to have those like later on in the game. She has them
Mm-hmm.
now. That's something this game does that's really awkward. We'll talk more about it at the end. Stuff that is not supposed to happen at all until way later in the game, they've pulled in here. So I'm really curious how they're going to fill those spots later on in the game when those old moments are supposed to
Mm-hmm.
have popped up. But I don't know. How'd you feel about the whole just Gungaga story aspect, the stuff they did there?
I really enjoyed it. I don't know. I kind of liked. Was that the section where Tifa was in the live stream and she, like you said, she was
Mhm.
seeing her visions and kind of going through some of the stuff with Cloud, kind of when they're children and all that base stuff. I think that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought it was fun. I think it's kind of interesting here because, and with my memory with the original game, it felt as though Aerith was like the, I don't know why, I feel like she was the one that got a lot of the more story driven back, lore based stuff, and I feel like they definitely delve deeper into Tifa, and I feel like that might be kind of a good thing because again, we kind of know so much about Aerith now from the previous games. I don't know, I feel like Tifa kind of needs a little bit more.
Well, part once again is they kind of moved it up. Like it's
Hmm.
not that they didn't do that in the original game, but you're right. The first kind of half of the game was about Aerith because they're building up to that moment and who she was and what she was supposed to do. And then Tifa after that point was supposed to be the one to kind of bring Cloud back from the brink, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of Tifa's development kind of happened later on in the first game. I mean, they have changed those dynamics a little bit, partially because they probably wanted you to be more connected to Tifa. You have her, you know, a companion. She can be one of the characters you date if you want. So I think they probably wanted to give her a little more oomph now, which might be why they moved her flashback so soon into the game. So yeah, it was, I think, a nice way to boost her character let's go with development a little bit. But one thing I will say, I don't know if you recall, the Gungaga section in the original game was like 30 minutes. It was like a pit stop.
I
You
was
didn't
gonna
do
say
anything
I
in
didn't
Gungaga.
when I initially played the game, I didn't even remember Gungaga. I was like, was this a
I
part of the
think it was
original game?
completely, I think it was optional. I don't think you had to go there. I think if you went there, I think you could still meet Zach's parents. What else? I think the Turks might have been there. I don't know if you fought them or not, but it was just a pit stop. You didn't do much in the way of that. I'm pretty sure you could have skipped the whole thing. So they took that and they just completely blew it up as far as making its own region, which once again, I think the worst traversal area, but granted a more interesting narrative. So I don't know.
And didn't we also kind of learn from this game that so Sephiroth is the leader of that other group that's going up against Shinra, the one that Yuffie is in? Because we end up learning that that main guy
No.
was actually Sephiroth the whole time, the one that goes up to the Shinra sun.
Yes and no. It's not that Sephiroth is in charge of that other group. He's using clones to manipulate the war. And here, that's actually kind of new. That's not from the original game that I recall
Yeah,
by any means. So I think that's a story beat they're kind of building
because at
on, like maybe
Gungaga,
explain
Yuffie's
why he's
like,
wanting to
why are
manipulate.
yeah at Gungaga, Yuffie's like, we're at war. Why are our soldiers here at this base or whatever? And
Well, in
she's
the
like,
original
well, no
game, the
one even
war had
told
already
me.
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the war was over. I think you had like some resistance, but it was more like when you get to Wutai, they're just like, "Oh, this is what happened in our conflict with Shinra." It wasn't like an ongoing thing. This game is basically refueling that
yeah.
conflict, so it's different, and that's interesting. Yeah, Sephiroth is using that clone of oh, the other guy's like another soldier. I think he was he the first soldier? I don't. He's from like a mobile game or something. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
this is doing very much Kingdom Hearts stuff where they're bringing in characters that you might kind of know and doing some weird stuff with them.
And
So
they kind of like were building up to the leader of Rutai, and they build up this one scene where you're seeing like a live stream or something, and they're like, "Here
yeah,
is our great leader," and then it cuts away, and it's like who's this guy? I don't was he a part? I don't know what's a part of what anymore.
yeah. I mean that's technically third game stuff or third disc stuff. So I mean there is things that happen with Wutai in the original game. They're making it a bigger thing than they did in the first. So I'm sure that's going to be a bigger focal point when we get to whatever the third game's going to be. But
Yeah,
I don't know. So where are we at with this? I don't think we want to go through every narrative beat. You end up going
nah,
back to Gold Saucer. You have to get the Keystone. You have the whole battle where you have to fight Dio. What is it? Oh, Quineo comes back,
that
and you
Don
have to go ahead
Corneo.
and fight again. Which I thought that was all fun. You get the Turks that pop in. You got to fight Rufus at the end. So that was all fun. Once again, it's combat focused. When the game's combat focused, I'm all on board.
So I guess
And
another
but
thing is, why did Yuffie try and assassinate? Just because she's with Wutai? That was the whole reason she tried to assassinate
yeah,
Rufus?
there's more to her backstory. I know, like her boyfriend lover guy gets killed. I don't remember exactly the
I
context there,
remember
but
because when
yeah,
you do the Red 13 stuff, you go. Oh no, not that wasn't Red. That was. Oh gosh, that was the part with Aerith where everyone has to like re-go through their traumas or something,
Yuffie has her trial.
and
Yeah.
that's her one trial. Is I didn't even know who the guy that killed her boyfriend. There was some other guy.
That comes from what is it? The reintegrate DLC for remake. So
I have
it's
no
one of those.
idea.
It's very Kingdom Heartsy.
Yeah, this
Um,
story is
I
like
think
all
her
over the
big thing
place.
was she is a ninja assassin for Wutai, and Shinra has screwed over Wutai. So I think, yeah, it was in her interest to off their president because they don't like Shinra. Nobody likes Shinra. So, I mean, I think her motivation was fine, but that was a new beat to a certain extent.
No,
It was also a new beat that Rufus, going back to that point, actually tried to create a truce with Cloud. Be like, hey, you stay out of my way, I'll let you guys go. So
that
that
was
was a
kind
whole
of neat.
new thing
Yeah, I
too.
kind of like that.
Um, oh man, what else is there? So we're towards the end of the game. You get the
And I get
keystone.
another thing I didn't really like is like you face some of the bosses of Shinra throughout the game, And for some reason, I kept like hoping that some of them would die, and I don't think you killed one of them. Like you fought the
What, the
lady.
church?
No, the actual
Oh,
leaders
yeah.
of Shinra, and you faced the lady at
It's in the third game,
Gagaga,
they all die.
and it's like she didn't die from that battle. You defeat the other guy right after the Barrett section. He's in like a mech. He doesn't die, and it's like,
They're saving it. Well, if they're matching up with the OG story, the third game is when a lot of that stuff happens. You
what
battle them over and
happens?
over again.
Who kills him? Probably Sephiroth, right? Or do you? I don't even remember.
There you go back to Midgar, towards the end, or I don't know if it's all you or what part of your team does, and there's like a war out
My
in
memory with the
Midgar.
original game is so bad. I gotta play it again.
I mean, I'm trying to recall it too because it has been a while since I played the original, but I know you're back in Midgar and you fight a lot of those Shinra executives again. But
Because I
either
remember
way,
I mean, majority of this game has to take place because Nibbleheim, right? You go back to Nibbleheim, and there's like a final. That's not the final section, but that's before the final section, right? Because you have to go to the mountain. There's like a mountain section in
but
Nibbleheim.
that's not Mount Nibelheim you go to. You go to the northern mountains.
Do you? Gosh. See, I
Oh
gotta
man, you're
play
asking
it.
me to remember. Because I know there's the whole snowboard section. You go through the snowy cliffs. You go up there to get Sephiroth in the northern mountains.
Mm-hmm.
That's where he reveals he's been up there the whole time. Cloud gets thrown into the is it the life stream or something. He gets poisoned. He gets rescued by Tifa. They end up in did they end up in Wutai, or is that a separate section? I don't know. I'm a little cloudy on some of the specifics there too, but
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. There's a lot more.
I will just say, when it comes to the next game, since we can kind of round out my thoughts,
Hold around it. Yeah, we still got to talk the ending. We have to talk the moment and a few other things.
oh yeah, let's go right into that then.
Okay, so we do the temple stuff. I'm trying to think if
Which
anything
that
interesting
annoyed
happened in the
me. All
temple.
the upside down crap. I was just like, dude, just let me get there.
The upside down didn't remind me. The splitting of the party drove me crazy again. Like you had Cloud and his team, they had Aerith and her team. And Aerith had that life stream spirit soaking mechanic she had to go through
Mm-hmm.
to open up portals or whatever they were. Like that's the kind of stuff that drove me crazy. Like it was just a mechanic they had to interact with, that's fine. But when you split the party up and have to repeat an area just for the sake of doing it, that was too
We
much.
also
And the
didn't bring
temple
up.
was very bad at that.
We also didn't bring up throughout the game the what is it? The Nega Cloud, Evil Cloud, him
Yeah.
turning all the time, and I gotta say that was so stupid because you were bringing it up at the end of the Aerith section with the Citra Temple, and it's like throughout this entire game, everyone knows he's evil, everyone knows he's turning, and they still let him hold the white orb at the end. It's like I didn't get it. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, this game I think makes it a little more obvious. I'm trying to remember how much that happened in the original. Like, the whole point is that he's being influenced by the Jenova cells.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that's how you become a soldier. You have Jenova cells inside
Yeah,
of you. That's the whole point of their reunion, all of that.
but
So,
I mean,
I,
at the end, everyone knows he's evil, and Aerith even says, "Haha, we gave you a fake. That's the fake orb. That's not the real one." And then I don't know. I didn't understand why they even let him get near the orb. Or was it the
yeah, I mean, I
black
think it
orb? That's right.
the black materia. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I mean, they were probably giving him more benefit of the
He
doubt than
literally
need
tried
be.
to stab Tifa and threw her into a life stream. It's like
But I don't think anybody knew that. Like, I'm trying to think back to that scene. Like, they saw Tifa fall in. Tifa never tells anybody what happened because I think she like worries about Cloud, and Cloud never said anything. So the other team doesn't even know he's responsible, to my understanding. I don't know.
convenient,
You have to, yeah, you have to make some, consolations here a little bit, but I don't
I
know.
guess.
Maybe it's a plot hole. Maybe it's just them wanting to be trusting of their boy Cloud. And I don't know. They're all simping for him. I couldn't tell you, to be honest. Um, but I guess everything kind of starts happening at the end of the temple, right? You have this whole black materia deal where Aerith takes it, and then Cloud goes chases her down because he's being controlled now pretty much by Sephiroth towards the end. And they get slashed down, and they fall into where? And this is where the game starts getting weird. They start really digging into that, multiple timeline kind of thing. Um, So when they get knocked out, they pop up in a completely different timeline where the world is already doomed. Did you catch all that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So to my understanding, there's probably more than this. There's at least 3 timelines. There's the original like Final Fantasy VII timeline from the OG game. You have the Rebirth timeline where things are starting to get a little weird and they're changing a few things. Then there's a third timeline where the world's already doomed. Like Sephiroth's already won, the meteor's coming down, etc. So at different points, they're in different versions of these, and every once in a while they like branch off into variations of those. And this is where Zack's role starts really kind of popping in weird places. So Zack will like make decisions on saving Biggs in one world, and then it
What,
branches in the next one he's saving someone else.
what was the point in Biggs? He survived the remake only to get killed immediately in this one. It's like,
So part of that could be once again the determination of the fates. Like you can't escape fate. Maybe you don't. It's Final Destination pretty much.
I
So
guess
you may not die when you died. But there's some weird stuff happening too, and this is where it gets muddy. Not all these characters stay in the same timeline. Like they have points where like Big says he remembers being from the original timeline from remake, but then he's in a different timeline now. So I don't know exactly how all that correlated. It gets really muddy. Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry. Sorry, I thought my kid was coming in for just a minute.
No, you could.
What was I gonna say? It gets muddy, I guess, is where I'm going with this. So it's hard to kind of gauge what's happening on. It once again feels very Kingdom Heartsy or something at this point, where just all these different things are colliding. I don't even remember where my brain was going with that. I confused myself just talking about it all.
Yeah, we've been going on a while. But yeah, let's just gosh, I mean, did we really talk about the moment yet? I mean, and how that?
No, I was trying to build to it because we weren't quite there. The point being is that you have Aerith, who's very conscious of all these different timelines, and she's basically pulling Cloud between them. To my understanding, she's helping one version of herself get the materia to Cloud. Because if you remember, there's a point where, and I think it's the main remake timeline, or I guess a Rebirth timeline, Aerith gives Cloud the white materia, but it's empty. You caught that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point is, for some reason in that timeline, she doesn't have the materia she needs. By going through these other timelines and her being conscious between them, she basically has another version of herself give Cloud the white materia, who Cloud gets sent through the other timelines to give that materia back to the Rebirth Aerith. So it's some really weird stuff because you have characters that know what's going on, other characters that are just stumbling through it, and it gets really hard to understand who's where, if they know where they are. Zack is literally tumbling through all of them. So there are points where Zack like bumps into Cloud in one timeline. He ends up just outside the church before Aerith gets stabbed inside the church in a certain timeline. Like, gets real muddy, and I'll tell you, there's no way in the next few minutes we're gonna be able to add any clarity to that. But going into all that, it leads into the moment. Aerith is praying at the altar, and we're on the Rebirth timeline. And the whole point is she comes up, he's doing the thing where he's about to, slash Aerith. He's being tempted by, in this case, the Whispers. I think in the original game it was more Jenova cells were trying to like shift him over.
And Cloud saves her, right?
So this is the big open to discussion moment. So in the way it plays out initially in Rebirth is he breaks free of the control of the Whispers, and then as Sephiroth is coming down to give old Aerith the pokey pokey, Cloud blocks it. So the whole moment everybody was hoping he'd be able to, divert or change. He does. He pushes back Sephiroth. All's good. Sephiroth's sword falls to the ground. Everything's great. And then things start flashing, and it shows the sword now dripping with blood, and Aerith's been stabbed. So the question is, what's really happened in the main Rebirth timeline? Did Aerith live? Did she die? And Cloud is just visualizing her alive? Because once again, he's basically gone crazy at this point between like the Jenova cells and all this other stuff. He's influenced by Whispers. I don't know. It gets really, really muddy. And then you also have them hopping to the other timeline, still that third one where the world is doomed. And this is when this like 12-phase boss battle with Sephiroth plays out. Which something I'll tell you, I didn't like about the battle is kind of shifting gears a little bit. Sephiroth was like in his final form in this battle. Did you catch that? Like he's not supposed to go to that weird like double-headed monster form until the end of like the straight up OG game, and you fight him here in that form.
I didn't realize that, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's another form, but you never did that in the original game. So once again, that feels like a weird thing they've done. But you go through this big boss battle where you're fighting Sephiroth in like 3 different timelines with different party members, all kind of intertwining and whatnot. And then
Yeah,
it
Zack and
ends, or
Cloud are
the
like
last phase
passing
of the
by
battle.
one another.
Yeah, they're like high-fiving each other, doing a little quick battle, and then splitting off again. So once again, as far as which timeline anybody's in, I think is really up to discussion. But I think the real weird part is at the very, very end, the last phase of the battle, you're fighting just Sephiroth in his one-winged form. And it's supposed to be like a Cloud one-on-one battle with Sephiroth. But then Aerith shows up. Now, I don't know if Aerith's already dead, if she's alive, which timeline she's coming from. Is she dead in all timelines? And Cloud's just, having her pop in through the live stream. And there's a lot of imagery that kind of occurs there, like she fades out back into the live stream after the battle, and then you come back. I don't know. It's very odd. The way they play it out too, there's scenes that very, very quickly shift between it looking like Aerith's there and then Aerith's not there, but everybody else is behaving the exact same way. So you've got the majority of the team mourning Aerith, and then all of a sudden she's there, and then she's not. And Cloud is the only one acknowledging her through all of this. And that's kind of how the whole ending kind of plays out. It keeps flipping back and forth. The entire team is mourning Aerith, but you see Aerith pop up multiple times, and Cloud either talks to her, acknowledges her, etc., etc. So,
Because even in the final scene, like, I thought it was kind of ridiculous that like Cloud is sitting there literally having a conversation with Aerith outside of the plane. While I was sitting there, I'm like, does no one hear him? The door is open. Does no one hear him talking to himself out here? Nothing weird going on. I don't
and
know.
that's why I think it's so open right now, and you could read this a bunch of ways. Like I think there's like 3 possible ways this is playing out. One way is there are timelines now where Aerith has died, and there's at least one timeline where she's alive. So it could be playing out that last timeline where she's alive. He's literally saying, "All right, we'll see you later. You go pray in the temple. We're gonna go do our thing." That seems like the least likely. The other option is he's straight up insane, right? He can't come to terms with the fact Aerith has died. He's visualizing her still there and communicating with her, but she's gone. She's done for, and everybody else just knows he's crazy at this point. Or there's the option where she is part of the live stream, and because he's also really in tune with the live stream now, he's been falling through all these different between worlds. Maybe he does have some way to literally communicate with her live stream version. Nobody else can, but he can. But none of those are very clear cut. Once again, they're all very open to interpretation. So I guess the big question is, do you like the direction they're going with that?
I don't know.
And I'm sorry for anybody listening to this. I don't know if I explained that well at all. Like
No,
going through that
I
as
think
I
you
was
did.
said, my brain's like flipping.
I think it comes to me. It's always going to come back now to that idea that I brought up earlier. It's just like, is this at the point where you should try and understand it? And I feel like if I approach it that way, I kind of like what they're doing because I don't know. I just don't know what to expect. I think if I try and understand it, it makes me like it a little bit less. I don't know. I don't know what I would want.
I agree.
Because she's supposed to be dead, so it's like I don't know. I don't know how to feel on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think people probably bring in a lot of different perspectives and emotions into this. Like, some people are very much, oh, gee, she died. She should be dead now. Other people are just really happy for the opportunity that she might not be. They'd never wanted her to die 25 years ago, so now they're happy she might be alive. I guess what I'm kind of weird about this is it all feels very non-committal, right? Like, I feel like Square is trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not opposed to what they're doing. I honestly kind of hope he's crazy. I don't know, because he is. I mean, he's
Well, you
messed
gotta
up with
remember,
degradation.
because in Remake they did the bait and switch where they tried to kill Barrett, and that's when
Mhm.
you were like, oh, is this game going off the rails? What do we not? And they ended up being like you were saying, where they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're like, hey, look,
Just kidding.
we could be going off the rails. No, never, we're sticking to it.
Yeah.
And it's like,
And I think what makes that sit weird too is like, because you're right, there's weird moments like, all right, he was just talking to Aerith while the rest of the team's, getting onto the tiny Bronco or whatever. He's sitting there talking to a ghost and nobody's acknowledging that. Like, depending which route they go with one of those three outcomes I mentioned, one just doesn't make sense. Like, if they go that route, and it's hard to commit to anything right now because things just feel very awkward, and I feel like there's some plot holes, loopholes, or convenient I didn't see them talk kind of situations are going to play out. I don't know. Once again, until we see the third game, we don't know exactly what they're going to do here. But I don't know. I'm kind of in the middle on this. I was more game and more willing for what they were doing in Remake because it was kind of that springboard. They could do anything. In this middle section now where we have no answers, it's a lot of theory crafting. There's enough ambiguity with what they've done that you can't really just be like, yeah, that's definitely what's happening. And I don't have a guarantee they're going to stick the landing. I feel like they made things very convoluted. And if Kingdom Hearts is anything to go by, and Nomura's track record with that, I don't know if this is going to stick the landing at all. Did you play? You haven't played all the Kingdom Hearts, have you?
I've been meaning to play 2. I've only played 1, and 1 was hard enough
So,
to try and figure out.
I mean, I'm not going to go into that by any means, but 3, like, you have 1 and 2 that are already weird, and they have all the 1,000 side games that make it even weirder. The third game, the way it plays out structurally, is 80% of the game is just regular Kingdom Hearts stuff. You're doing Disney Worlds or wherever doing things. The last, like, 3 hours of the game, they try to answer every question, to shove it into a box. You'd be like, yep, the game's over. We answered every question. And it felt really awkward. Like, I don't feel like anything was satisfying because it was all rushed. I feel like there were other loopholes that got left open because they didn't tie things up neatly in a good pace. And I'm now worried that's going to happen here. I mean, this game's structured differently than Kingdom Hearts, thank goodness, but I don't know if they're going to change the whole structure of this game going into the third iteration. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of open-ended stuff here, a lot of questions I have. I'm not nearly as willing to give them the benefit of the doubt as I did in Remake to be like, yeah, I'm cool with where they're going with this. I'm on this train. I don't know if this will pay off. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see, because, I mean, I would assume the game has to end with what you might expect, a big battle with Sephiroth, and everything leading up until then. I mean, we still got to get what Knights of the Round is still going to be there, and then you got Nibbleheim, probably return to Midgar.
Yeah, go back to Midgar. You've got all the mountain stuff, the northern canyon.
I remember the
northern
mountain stuff.
whatever it is.
I remember the mountain stuff actually taking a good amount of time in the original.
I think it's weird too. I'm curious how Reunion is going to play out, because in the first game, the Reunion was just bringing all the Jenova cells back together, right? All the cloaked people, Cloud, Sephiroth, they all end up back in the mountain. That's the Reunion, right? That's what reawakens Sephiroth. That's not what Reunion seems to mean in this game. Like, Sephiroth was like, the Reunion is now bringing all these timelines together. So, when and how is that going to play out in the original timeline? Because it can't just happen when they all meet up at the mountain, because there's more game after the mountain. Unless there's not more game after the mountain now. Like, the next game is just so open to what they might want to do here. The timelines just make it really kind of murky. So, yeah, I don't know. But technically, all the characters could still be alive, too. Zack, he's alive somewhere, and he can now travel between times, so he's going to pop up in the main game.
But he dies in one of them. He dies in one of them, right? Because he falls into the river, and Sephiroth doesn't save him.
Well, no, that...
Or did he live after falling into the river?
I think he's supposed to do that, though. He's supposed to do that in the original game, I think. And then he ends up being captured with Cloud in the Shinra Manor. That's where Cloud gets the Jenova cells, and then they escape, and that's where Zack gets killed, and that's where Final Fantasy, the OG, picks up after Zack is killed, I think. That's like Crisis Core and all this other nonsense. I don't know. It's already convoluted, and they're just making it even harder. But Zack is alive somewhere. Aerith is probably alive somewhere. I mean, maybe she's just on the live stream. Some other people have also looked at it as there are canon events that have to occur. Very Spider-Man, into the whatever Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
So like certain things will have to happen. Aerith has to die. Zach has to die. And I don't know if that's the route they're going here. Maybe, but it's weird. I don't know. I know I'm talking around in circles at this point. It's still pretty fresh with this whole ending. I'm not completely anti this game, but I'll tell you, I'm in a weird spot about it. Like, I don't think I'm going to be nearly as hyped going into the third game as I was this one. I've lost a lot of goodwill or benefit of the doubt. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for two things, I've lost it with the story a little bit because it's gone off the rails some in some weird ways, and I've definitely lost it from the general game structure. Like, I don't know if I want to play another open world game like this from them. Like, unless they make some major open world changes or I just really commit to not playing all the extra content, I don't know if I'm going to be up for it, but
No.
I guess we'll see in 5 years.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting place to leave things off. Is that I'll be honest, like a lot of the reviews I've seen for this have been overwhelmingly positive. I remember even on Maximilian Dude's channel, who I like his content, but he's kind of a Final Fantasy VII fanboy, and like he was saying this is the best Final Fantasy game and 7 game, and I was like, I don't know, man. Like I feel like I liked Remake more than this, and I like the OG more than this. I think yes, if you were to play this game through and through, just narrative and stuff, it's probably a fun time. But I have to include all of the time dragging included into my thoughts. Like I feel like that really dragged my experience down with the game as a whole.
I agree. Who is it? I was watching the review by I think it was Skill Up. I like Skill Up's reviews. I think he's really thorough. I typically like his opinions. I don't always agree with it, but it was odd. He was very favorable towards this game ultimately,
But then
but he also
criticized it a
called
bunch.
out
Yeah.
every little thing that we mentioned. And I feel like that should be a bigger weight. Like he, pass it off like, well, the fact that this even exists, that Square put so much effort into it and you have all these options is, incredible. But I feel like it's not all incredible content, and that should definitely bring things down a little bit. Yes, I don't have to play every piece of side content. That's fair. I get that. That doesn't make that content good, even for the people who do want to spend their time on it. This game should have been leaner. Some of the games and mini games should have been improved, and that would have made this a much more elevated experience. And then maybe I would have been more willing to accept, even when the narrative's going, if I didn't feel so dragged down by everything else.
But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I don't know if I'd say. I don't know. I think my brain just shut off.
Yeah, this is a hard game to talk about at past midnight at this point. I don't know. I do not like it as much as Remake. I will say that. Remake, I honestly, and I'm not big on ranking things, but since we're kind of going down that route, Remake was like a 9 to me. I really liked Remake.
I
This
think
is a 7.
What kills this one is that, like, even though again, liked the narrative, I feel like this game in terms of replayability is not one I want to return to. At least if I do, I know at this point, put it on easy, just do main quest if I'm ever gonna return to this game. But I don't think I'm gonna return to this one. I mean, to be granted, I loved 16, and I don't know if I'd return to 16 either. So they're a long time
games now.
A lot of commitment with these games.
Yeah, they're big games. Like, it's not like back in the day, oh, I want to go back and replay Batman Arkham Knight or something, or Arkham City. They're like 10, 20-hour long games. These games are 30, 40, 100 hours, depending how much you put into it. So a lot of times, the one playthrough you get is all you're going to get. I don't think I'll ever play Rebirth again. I don't know if I'll ever play Remake again. I'm more likely to, but that's still a 30, 40-hour long game. So I don't know. Will you play the next game, or has this game turned you off?
Oh no, I'll still definitely play the next one, but I don't know. I'll definitely play it simply because I'll know that'll be the last one, at least for a time. Maybe they'll last second be like, we're gonna turn this into a 4-part game.
I'm honestly worried about that. I mean, I'm in too deep now. I mean, I'll definitely play the third one, but I don't know. I am a little worried they're gonna do something else. Like, this game should have wrapped up in 2 games. I'm worried they're going to stretch out that third game and then have a 4th game or a spin-off game or who knows. Like, I don't know. we'll see, I guess.
Yeah. I should bring it up though. Recently I've been one game I never got to talk about with us podcast, but I played through Sea of Stars, man. That's another great RPG that you should definitely check out at some. Remember, it almost won Game of the Year. Was it last year or whatever? Great game.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, I think that's it. I don't think you need to hear any more from us for about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Down in the comments, we would love to hear what you guys think. Did you guys love, what is it, Condor, or what's the name of that game? Fort Condor. Did you love? Is that your favorite thing ever? We'd love to know down in the comments. Are you guys excited about Final Fantasy VII, whatever the third one's called? I guess talking about what we have in the future for the channel. Once again, I said we were gonna have shorter content, and we went on for 2 hours on this. But I don't know. It's up to Phoenix. I would love to talk Fallout whenever you're able to finish it. That would be kind of next thing on the board. It's late. Anyways, you got anything to say, Phoenix, before we roll out of here?
No, I think all that timeline stuff has fried my brain for tonight, so I'm done.
Yeah, I'm good. All right, everyone. I'll have to see. I know MetalGamer. I've been wanting to get him my game. See what he thinks in 6 months. All right, thank you so much for watching, guys. We love you. We, of course, can't wait to see you on the next EnteR, ChazmaN. So, bye, everybody.
See ya.